quality content of you going on podcasts and such. And it's cool to see you sort of on this journey of someone with like 30 something, 38 was it maybe, followers when I first met you. And it was really cool that I got to meet you right as you kind of entered the wonderful world of UFO Twitter, which can be a little stressful at times, but it's also very exciting. It's not never boring, I suppose. And then to, to see this kind of mission, that your dedication to the research and to sharing it with the world, I mean, I find it quite fascinating anyway. And Ashton, do you need some time to set up your stream? I don't want to
No, I
distract
think
you.
we're good to go. I was just should be going. Oh yeah, it looks like we're good here. So I think so. I'm gonna double check, but you guys, you can start. I was actually gonna. I had to leave your stream yesterday a little bit early with Steve Bassett. How did that end up in with him? How do you enjoy that? Give me your feedback.
I mean, it was like the most glitchy space ever. But it was really great considering. I feel like there was the feedback, at least my experience. Me wanting to represent someone I respect so much well, and to represent the UFO Twitter community. Well, it was not an ideal scenario to be the pulling all the levers, trying to keep things going. But and like ideally, like, a lot of people showed up, out of interest in Steve's amazing career. And I'm a filmmaker, editor, among other things. So I wish this app would have let me like cut it, like edit out the parts with silence. Just
Yeah.
to hear the beautifully coherent vision that Steve was doing such a great job of explaining. But it was cool to have all kinds of people have a chance to ask him all those questions. And I love to hear the way he responds to things, because he to me has this really great combination of optimism and sort of grounded realism based on his years of research and being on the ground, especially in this sort of political disclosure process. And it does seem to be lining up with all the other research I've been doing as well. So yeah, apart from the
Cool.
technical side, it went really awesome, I think.
Yeah, I think that maybe this is a good spot to start with it, because I think today's space I want to keep a little bit more open, where people can ask questions about the case and what's going on with it. I've done enough podcasts and stuff where we've gone over all the facts and details, but of course, if people have questions about them, I want to answer them. But one thing I wanted to bring up was, the question that I asked there was a little bit coy to Mr. Bassett, was about the technology. I think that a lot of people as well, they have this very optimistic approach to what the technology in disclosure really means, right? And I say this a lot in the spaces, is that with nuclear energy comes nuclear bombs. With energy that is fully green, free energy, stuff like that, comes potential doomsday weapons that are well beyond anything that we have today. And I think it's actually Star Captain here, who's on our space right now, gave me the great idea of talking about like warped nukes, right? So even if you don't advance the technology even more than what we just see in the MH370 videos, just the ability to warp a nuclear weapon is essentially unstoppable, right? And that's extremely dangerous. And so we have to be very responsible about the technology that we see and that we uncover in disclosure, to realize that, with this comes some very dangerous side effects. And so I can even understand why that theoretically the government would want to hide this information, right? But that's MH370 on those videos. So if they really wanted to keep it hidden, they should not have disappeared a passenger plane, covered it up with a fake conspiracy, vilified all these people, discredited all these witnesses, right? So now it's coming out. And that means for us, we just need to be very responsible with that information, with that technology.
Yeah, beautifully put. It does appear to be, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, the most compelling, at least, evidence, I'd like to say, for free energy. Are there other examples of that we can include? I mean, there's a lot of documents and things suggesting it, but nothing visually that depicts it, especially in such in absurdly dramatic fashion, in terms of it involving the most famous, the most mysterious and famous missing aircraft in history as well. So, I mean, this one definitely takes the cake, I guess. But are there any other examples of that you'd point to?
Of what? Sorry, can you clarify?
Oh, of potential evidence of this technology we're describing, of free energy and whatever else might be going on here?
I mean, I'm sure that if you look throughout ufology, there's certainly things that we can find similarities. I get sent them all the time. But with respect to the strength of the evidence, I don't think I've seen anything as strong as the evidence that we've seen in the MH370 case. With respect to the videos that we see, and on my stream, I'll pull them up in a little bit here. We have two different cameras. They're the most advanced cameras probably that are possible in 2014. They're both filming the same event from two different angles, and they both show exactly the same thing. And they're really up close. At least one of them is. One of them's from outer space theoretically, but it's very, very advanced. So I personally haven't seen anything about that high quality. If there are other things that are out there, other videos, then I would absolutely love to see them. And people have sent me some good stuff in general.
Hey, Red, glad to have you here. What's on your mind, buddy?
How's everyone doing? Happy UFO Twitter week. But I was going to say two things, actually. There's this one video from a ship that I saw that I wanted to get Ashton's take on about the alleged event. But firstly, I don't know, were y'all in the Sean Cahill space? I asked him about this case, and I found his answer pretty interesting. So I'm going to try and find it here, and we can maybe listen to it as a
Somebody
group.
sent me something about him, actually. Weirdly. That's so weird you brought that up.
Yeah, I was listening to it. It was really fascinating, and I was kind of exhausted and in the bathtub, and my hands were a little soapy. But I was actually about to ask pretty much the same question that you did,
so
Mr. Panda.
Before we maybe go into that, if you want to hold that real quick, that thought, I think I'd like to just go through what my theory is right now on the situation, and I have a flight path up on my video. You guys can also follow if you want to watch live on my YouTube channel, which is just YouTube, same at JustXAshton. You can find us that we're live over there right now. I also have the chat going there, although I just realized I have the chat hidden over here. So this plane takes off from Kuala Lumpur. It's headed to Beijing. It takes off at 1642 UTC. Now, we talk about it in UTC terms because it's easier to understand all the time frames that are happening, keep it straight. So about 40 minutes, this plane is flying northeast. It gets over the South China Sea. South China Sea is very well known right now in terms of being very contested between China and the United States. And at 1721, this plane goes dark. That's 64 seconds after the last communication. There's no alarms in the communication. Now, we believe that what happened here is a lithium-ion battery fire. And the reason why there might not be alarms is that you're not going to hear anything until these lithium-ion batteries explode. This plane has 221 kilograms. Half of it split to the front, half of it split to the back, if you believe the official report in terms of where they were. There is a witness, Mike McKay. He's sitting out on an oil rig 300 miles northeast. And those oil rigs are really high up, so he can see really far. He sees the plane on fire. Realize this is 1 a.m, so it's pitch black probably. His sighting is misreported as supposedly seeing the plane crash. He says he did not see the plane crash. He just saw it on fire. At the same time, there's 9 different people that all report really loud noises from the coastline, which again, sound carries over water. So these people hear this really loud noise, probably consistent with the explosion of the lithium-ion batteries. 9 of them. Now, this plane turns around. So 10 minutes later, this plane is flying very low, and it's turned around. It's going directly at Penang Langkawi International Airport. The Wired article that actually argues for a fire scenario argues that this is the correct airport to go to. So this plane turns around, goes directly to the nearest airport where it can accommodate an emergency 777 situation. 10 minutes later, 1730 UTC, these fishermen all see this plane flying very low. This indicates that there is potentially a depressurization, although it's quite the opposite of the official narrative that tries to blame the pilot. Because if you're trying to asphyxiate all the passengers, you're not going to fly low enough to give them enough oxygen. In order to keep these passengers alive with enough oxygen, you need to fly under 10,000 feet, potentially even lower. Otherwise, they are going to potentially asphyxiate from hypoxia. At the same exact time, there's a communication that's received by another 777 that's headed to Tokyo. They hear static, and they hear the sound of what they claim is the co-pilot or the pilot. So this actually casts doubt as to whether or not the communications were really off. So this is a very important piece of information. Now the plane continues to fly over mainland Malaysia, which is a peninsula. There were some reports, which I haven't dug into to confirm, because this is like there's people that live out there that theoretically saw this plane flying pretty low as well, which would corroborate even more that this plane wasn't going up and down like these radar data says. It was just going in a straight shot, low enough where people would be able to breathe. It gets to Penang at 1752 UTC. This is 30 minutes after the plane goes dark. Pretty quickly. For whatever reason, it doesn't land. Now, one thing here is that the co-pilot's cell phone pings a local cell phone tower. So it was probably low enough that they were able to ping a cell phone tower. Really important information. Now, if you look at the flight manual for what you're supposed to do in an emergency situation, first thing is try to get this plane on the ground as fast as possible. But we know they didn't. So I think we can safely assume there was something wrong with the landing gear. Maybe even the fire began with the landing gear, like the Wired article argues. Wired article says that the tires might have heated up so much that they burst into flames. Maybe that set off a chain reaction 40 minutes later after the plane takes off that ignites the batteries. That's theoretical, speculative. Whatever happened, they couldn't land here. The next thing it says to do if you can't land safely with your landing gear is that you should try to land on your belly. Now, the problem with trying to land on the belly, on the land, is that this plane is filled with 6 more hours of fuel. So this thing is loaded up with fuel. If you try to land with that much fuel, you're going to explode. Everybody's going to die. So it says that, okay, you should try to dump the fuel. But if you try to dump the fuel while your plane's on fire, that also does not seem like a really good idea. I actually read some reports about planes dumping fuel and covering children in kerosene. It doesn't seem like it's very safe in general. So most likely what happened here is they were unable to dump the fuel either. Now the next thing you're supposed to do is land in the ocean. So what does the plane do? It goes over Penang and it goes out into the ocean. Now potentially this plane at this point had communication with the US government. And they had a rendezvous point set up. Because otherwise you would probably just land in the ocean right near the airport. But instead it goes all the way out to the Nicobar Islands. Now keep in mind, landing in the ocean, that's not a safe bet either. So landing in the ocean's not like landing in the Hudson River, like Sully Sullenberger did. The Hudson River is very narrow. The waves are not nearly as volatile as in the ocean. So if this plane lands in the ocean, even on a controlled descent, it's going to break apart. Probably going to sink pretty quickly. And all the people potentially are going to have a hard time because it's middle of the night. At this point, we're looking at 2 a.m. The sun is down. The moon is down. There's no light. That's been corroborated as well by a witness. So they argue, or that the official data says they lose track of the plane at 1822 UTC, which is 230 miles into the Malacca Straits off of Penang going northwest. Interestingly enough, this is not what the reports the next day said. They waited weeks to release this radar data, and it was very sketchy. People did not trust the radar data. The next day, what people were saying is that this plane went dark at 1840 UTC, which is the time that our boat with the witness on it sees the plane. This is also the time where the plane supposedly turns into the South Indian Ocean, and the location where it supposedly turns into the South Indian Ocean. This is also within 3 minutes of an intercepted communication, only reported in Chinese news, that says this plane was disintegrating and attempting an emergency landing. This is consistent with our event that we've speculated on here with so far all of the witnesses. Catherine T sees this plane while on a boat. She doesn't know what she's looking at. She sees an orange glowing plane. At first she thinks it's a missile, but then she can see into the cockpit and she can see that this is actually a plane. It doesn't have any navigation lights, which indicates that potentially the power is out. This also cast doubt on the official story that somehow this plane reconnected in terms of the power. Most likely it never did, especially not if it was a fire scenario. Also keep in mind, in the fire scenario, this plane's not lasting 8 hours or whatever they claim this plane lasted into the South Indian Ocean. It's actually a miracle that it even lasts an hour and 20 minutes. And what that would mean is they had to be fighting the fire consistently. And so if they are fighting this fire consistently, all this halon gas that they use is creating this bromine chemical that's causing the orange glow to permeate throughout the whole plane. The orange glow is consistent with the fire scenario as well. So Catherine T sees, and she actually reported to me that this plane was already low when she first saw it. It was not at cruising altitude. Again, consistent with all the witnesses and what they stated, and consistent with the pilot trying to save the plane, not trying to kill everybody on the plane. She sees it actually descending, which again is consistent with our videos. Our videos show the plane descending. It also is in the same direction of travel, counterclockwise turn, in both their sighting that was actually reconfirmed by the GPS in her boat, as well as what we see in the videos, as well as the official flight path. So we have multiple sources that show that this plane would be in the same right location at the right time. Not just that. We were able to track USA 229 with its sister satellite, officially classified as debris, in the right location to send the satellite data that we need to send to the Sibers system to be able to create our quote-unquote satellite video. At the time of that, also 1840 UTC. So we have a ton of corroborating data that says our videos all happen here where the witness's boat is, essentially. So this is in our Nicobar Islands. In addition to that, the drone that we see was most likely dispatched from one of the islands nearby. There's a base there. And that base, let me see if I can pull it up for the people who are watching. That base theoretically had these drones there. We found some other corroborating evidence that those drones might potentially be there. So I'm going to open this in a browser for the people who are watching. And that's the VOCX base location. And this is a joint India and US base in the Indian Ocean here. Interestingly enough, you draw a line from that base to our location. It's at basically the same direction at which we see our drone taking the video from the north. So this is another angle of corroboration for our whole story here. So very interesting how much evidence we have for it. And then in our video, we see these orbs circling around the plane. They're far too exact to be manually piloted. And we see them doing a pattern that's encircling the plane. Halfway through or somewhat time through this, we see the pattern change. And they begin to circle the plane in a ring formation vertically. About 10 seconds later, zap, the plane is gone. Now, what we think is happening here is, and I hope I'm still saying this correctly, macroscopic decoherence. Some people have argued it's macroscopic coherence. The idea is that they're theoretically, these orbs are showing superconductive properties. They're negating the force of gravity entirely by having their mass reduced. A lot of this comes down to mass reduction. They're creating a field. What we're seeing is not a solid orb, it's a field around something. And then combined, and I'm going to ask Salvatore Pais this tomorrow, they are doing something that's essentially allowing the same type of mechanism to happen to the plane, where they're allowing a quantum state of a solid object. And that quantum state is allowing for that object to decohere, to revert to a wave function, to speed up. If its mass is reduced, the time increases for it. Time moves faster, therefore it can speed up faster. Think of like Quicksilver from the X-Men movies, right? That's kind of what's happening to our plane here. And that's allowing it to teleport, move the speed of light. Now keep in mind, cameras are just pictures that are stacked on top of each other based on the frame rate. If the frame rate's not fast enough, then we can't see the plane. In real life, you might see some type of redshifting effect. So where did the plane go? We don't necessarily know, but I'll open it up to questions and we'll just talk about this incident. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I want to hear what Mello thinks and just answer questions for you guys for, next hour, hour and a half, however long you guys have stuff.
Well, I think it's a very perfectly fitting together narrative, and it's quite exciting to have had the pleasure of knowing you from your early Twitter days. till now, because I've sort of seen piece by piece how these things do really fit together. It doesn't mean I'm a scientist that can validate it 100%, but I think it's brilliant. But Mr. Panda, what's on your mind?
So I have kind of three things, but two things first. In the nest, I put this video that is allegedly supposed to be from the ocean view of, I think, just the contrails. I think it's after the fact that part of me thinks that the really first second you could see a little bit, but they like pan around. And I love that Ashton's streaming right now too. Have you seen this video, Ashton? And do you have any thoughts on it?
Sorry, let me look. I'm trying to figure out how to make the nest work.
I put it in the nest, and it's also in the comments down here. It said the title of the video is Malaysia Flight 370 UFO Alien. And what's interesting about this video too is the date it was uploaded was also I found interesting.
Yeah, so here's my problem with this. I've seen certain accounts post this and try to get me to post it. The problem is our videos happen at 2:40 in the morning. This, you can see sunrise, right? So these smoke trails are not going to last that long in the sky. So most likely this is not actually tied to our videos. And that's why we have to be very careful about tying evidence, is that we need, if somehow our videos are happening in the morning, this could potentially be it. But there's nothing in these videos that directly gives us corroboration. It's just a trail that ends. And it actually looks like contrails that are high enough in the sky. Keep in mind, ours are also relatively low. So we're seeing these cumulus clouds in our videos, which show that it's potentially between 1,000 and 5,000 feet, which are really low. So could it be? Possibly, but I don't find enough corroboration to accurately link it to our videos at this point. But sharing it still, I appreciate any and all evidence and willing to look at it all. So thanks for sharing that, Panda.
Cool. Yeah, I still kind of got an open book with it. I'm gonna look into it more for myself. Yeah. And then here's what I asked Sean Cahill earlier about this, and I found his response pretty interesting. Let's see. Let me see if I got all this.
And can you give me some background?
Oh yeah, so Sean Cahill, he was actually a witness. Well, I still consider this a witness. He was a witness to the Nimitz events. He didn't see the Tic Tac, but he was on, I think, might have been the Princeton or something like that. And he allegedly is the one who I think Kevin Day reported it to at some point. So I like the way he phrased it today too. He was a witness of his chain of command's response to this event, the 2004 Tic Tac event, which I think is that's all valuable information, right? When you're building a whole picture of something. So he's part of that, and then he's also kind of part of the, for better or worse, rollout group, you know what I mean? And lately he's kind of embraced more of the woo side of things.
Okay.
But he is close with Lou Elizondo. You see him on the news all the time, kind of talking about this stuff every now and then whenever something breaks or something. He's kind of one of the on-hand pundits for a lot of this stuff. So that's who that is. So he's kind of and also he was in the Navy, right? So he saw the Tic Tac event. He was on search and rescue, and he actually retired in 2015. So I asked him about this case from his perspective back then, and then also about the reemergence of these videos and the thoughts on that. And it's pretty interesting. So that's the background on him, and let's get to the clip.
And the same with dreams. And I'll end on change and positive change.
Tupa talking.
The spiritual in the mind. And so they do so by building it.
It's not just me. It using a FS itself. There is something for end of time. And
I'm right after Tupa.
Questions, Sam. Okay. I think it was Panda next, then Paul, then Shane.
Hello, everyone. Great space. Holly and Stone doing a good job. Thank you, Sean, for being here. I appreciate what you guys have done.
Let's see what he has to say.
There's no denying, from 2017 to now, things are very different. Might not have agreed with everything along the way. And thank you for your service. And my question kind of leans into that, because you were in the Navy from 95 to 2015 is what it says online. Is that accurate?
This is gonna be really
cool. Thank you for your service. And then me and a bunch of other people on UFO Twitter are pretty into the resurfacing of the whole MH370 anomalous disappearance. And I'm curious about your take on the disappearance of the plane back in 2014 when you were still active, and then your take on the emergence of these videos that were posted in 2014.
So
thank you.
Yeah. So I've been involved with search and rescue before for folks that have fallen overboard and for aircraft that have been lost at sea or ships that have foundered. It's a scary experience for all involved. We lost someone in the Persian Gulf over the side. One thing that was amazing was to see almost every maritime force in the AOR, in the area of responsibility, which was the Persian Gulf, stop what they were doing and go into search and rescue. So we're talking Iranian Navy,
So
IRGCN,
we did search and rescue and did find
which
one
is
piece of this
their
plane.
hokey Coast Guard that messes with us all the time.
When we got
Qataris,
satellite video like
Emiratis,
this.
you name it. Anybody that had a boat was helping us, and it was amazing. So moving to, I can never, MH, what was the whole designation again?
Doesn't know the
MH70.
airline designation?
I'm sorry, 370, right.
Okay.
So that
I'm suspicious.
that
guys.
whole thing is, obviously it's a mystery. Okay, and the search and rescue
Doesn't
efforts
sound like you've seen the videos.
were incredibly disappointing. I think all of us thought that our technology and our surveillance capability should have been able to pinpoint that and give the families some solace. And I think that we also know that it seems that the United States government's reticence to share their technological abilities.
I agree. We should have been able to see it.
Beyond that, getting to the meat of what you're talking about, I have not been able, and I'm open to hearing from anybody, but in my own research, I took a detour off of that because I wasn't able to verify that the data we were looking at was from the systems or from systems that are in the mix. So I kind of got off the freeway on that. But I looked at those videos and I analyzed them in the manner that I'm able to with the technology I have, and I did find some very interesting things going on with temperature. I thought that if it was edited in CGI, someone was very knowledgeable and had read a lot of the DIRDs and other reports or data from Bigelow or other people. So I find it very confusing, and I've kind of stayed out of the mix, to be honest with you.
Great, thank you so much.
Suspicious answer.
So yeah, that was his response. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting response there.
What's your take on it? Yeah.
I think the thing he says about the temperature is pretty weird, because I think he's obviously referring to the thermal video, right? And he's talking about the zap being cold in that, for sure. And that's definitely what he's talking about there. And the reason why he's talking about that is because that's a black hole that we're seeing there. And I'm, at this point, like 100% sure that's what we're looking at there, because I was listening to the Theory of Everything podcast earlier today with Salvatore Pais, and he actually mentions that with high enough energies, it would create a black hole, and it would create a void in the empty vacuum state. So I think his answer is a little bit coy there. If he's somebody who's involved in search and rescue, he's going to exactly know what these assets look like, right? And potentially he's going to know what these satellite assets look like. Keep in mind, he's going to be under an NDA. He can't speak about it at all, especially not the satellite capabilities. So that answer to
kind
me
of spoke
is,
to that, I think, too, right? In the beginning, when he was like, the U.S. didn't really disclose all of its technological capabilities that could have helped find it or something like that. That's kind of the vibe I got there.
Yeah, he said that they should have been able to see it, right? And I, at the same time on my stream, is playing the video. It's like, yeah, no duh. They should have been able to see it. We're staring at it on 2 videos, right? And one of them is literally a satellite video. So I think that he knows more than he's letting on there, for sure. Most likely that's as close as we can get from somebody who has an NDA to basically authenticate that those videos are real. And at this point, I'm 100% sure that they are. So I think that's a pretty interesting response. And I think the fact that he said he was staying away from it is also a very interesting response, right? Because we've seen that from a lot of people. Nobody wants to touch these. And if they were fake, everyone would be all over them. I mean, look at how much fake stuff people are pushing, or stuff that, let's not call it fake, but let's call it questionably real. And people have no issue pushing it or promoting it, talking about it, right? All of these UFO disclosure people are all avoiding these videos. To me, that's quite telling. So that's a really interesting point or kind of just clip that you brought up there, Panda. I appreciate that. I actually got text messaged about this clip as well, and now I know that's where it came from. So and let me just, we can take another question. I'm going to pull up that text message because now I'm curious if there's any additional context that I potentially missed.
Yeah, it was cool to be there. I was going to do a follow-up, but like I said, my hands were a little soapy in the bath. But yeah, I'm so glad Panda asked that. So effectively, and the response was so revelatory. And hey, we got Money Penny. I don't know if this is my first time meeting you, but I'm really glad to have you here. What are you thinking at this time?
Wow, this is great. I'm from the UK. I'm a former BBC journalist, so my investigative juices have really got going on this. And I am in no way technically adept and able to question the intricacies of the different videos and the technical aspects of this. I am going to prioritize my question because I could be here for hours, but at the macro level, the first question we all have to ask ourselves is why? Who was behind this? Why Malaysia? Why M3H70? Was it something to do with the passengers? I've watched so many now documentaries, I don't know which one I'm referring to, but there is one that talks about Russia and Ukraine and Turkestan. And there is another that refers quite interestingly to another plane disappearance. This was F-15 fighter jets, Japanese ones that disappeared into nowhere. I'm just trying to get the date up for you. 11th of August 2020 was the report. I want to know a little bit more about the islands where the US military bases are that are very close to this. And I'd love to know Ashton's call, not on the tech, but on the big picture. Is this a military strategy where an exercise was created using military stealth, not only the satellites to do the tracking, but perhaps the drones or some sort of other flight capability? We're talking about a lot of reverse engineering on alien craft has come into discussion of late. What do you think it is, Ashton? Why is this something that might be connected to the American military, and do you believe that's what it is?
Yeah, great questions, Moneypenny. Thanks for being on here. Glad that we have someone who has your level of prestige on here. So first thing I would address is the points you said about the documentary. You were actually speaking about Jeff Wise's theory that the plane went to Russia. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. The problem with that theory mainly is that there would be so many radar systems that would have seen it if it flew to Russia. Pretty conclusively rules that out in general. And we're not going to cover up for Russia either if Russia was the one to take it. What we see in our videos here are both American assets that are filming this. We're seeing the SBIRS system, which is the space-based infrared system. And that is essentially like a Google Earth video playback that nobody before seeing these videos knew was possible. Satellite technology from the United States is some of the most closely held guard secrets. The person that leaked these was facing life in prison over this. The second one is an MQ-1C Gray Eagle, also another U.S. asset, with a very advanced electro-IR camera. The drone is made by General Atomics. The camera is most likely made by Raytheon. It has a colorized thermal that's been added over the top of it, indicating that the person that leaked this is most likely an operator. They had to have the knowledge base to turn the FLIR footage into the thermal version. Based on the dates that we see in the videos, it says received March 12th, 2014 on the satellite video. That's 4 days after the event. This builds a psychological profile. We can also tell that the HUD data has been removed. The satellite is cropped to only show the plane. And we know that because we can see the mouse move off the top of the right and the bottom left of the screen. We're able to show with the mouse frames per second, 24 frames per second, versus the background of the satellite, 6 frames per second, that what we're looking at is a Citrix session that was logged into the actual Intel Spy Satellite database. We can also tell that we're looking at a screen recording. This is not somebody recording it with a camera behind them or even their cell phone. They most likely did this because they needed absolute proof for people to take it seriously. And we still didn't take it seriously back in 2014. I'm right now on my stream looking at the archive footage right in front of me. And it goes back to 2014 for sure. A lot of people, including myself, saw one of these videos in 2014 before they had been deleted. And they've been out there available to find if you were so inclined. So to your point, the reason why people like Jeff Wise, Florence DeChangi, who I've talked to, who's a very intelligent woman, the reason why they knew something was amiss is that a 777 can't crash into the ocean without leaving a debris field. That's the biggest and strongest evidence for why the official narratives are simply a lie. Is that even on a controlled descent, like I talked about in that flight path, this plane is going to crash apart into tons of pieces. There's going to be bodies. There's going to be luggage. There's going to be parts of the plane floating all over. And it's going to spread out into a huge debris field, especially in the water. This would have been visible from space for days. And we showed that the U.S. has satellites everywhere. We would have seen it the very next day. So we can cast so much doubt on the official narrative. Even just today, I reported that there was no black boxes found. They searched all along the 7th arc for these black boxes. They should have been able to find the black boxes easily. There was multiple systems that should have heard it crash into the ocean. The SOSA system, the same one that heard the Titan sub pop, that same system existed back in 2014. It should have heard the plane crash into the ocean. They should have pinpointed its exact location immediately. Didn't hear anything. 2 hydrophone systems also didn't hear anything. Western Australia has hydrophone system. Diego Garcia also has hydrophone system. They also heard no plane crash into the ocean, at least down in the southern Indian Ocean or anywhere as far as we know. Indonesia has a radar system, and Australia has the Joran radar system. Both would have seen the plane go into the South Indian Ocean. Neither did. 19 families of the victims signed statements saying they could call the cell phones for up to 4 days of the passengers. 19 of them. Not just 1 or 2, 19. One person proved it on television. We showed the video on my Twitter several weeks ago. The Southern Indian Ocean is an active shipping route from Africa to Australia. They have this plane crashing in the early morning where the sun is up at 8 in the morning, local time. No witnesses at all saw this plane anywhere over there. No witnesses on this active shipping route saw any debris field anywhere. The official narrative right away was that somehow this plane did a swan dive, perfect swan dive into the water, and that's how it somehow didn't break up, which doesn't make any sense. And it ended up being changed later on, after the story had gone cold. And they claim, no, it didn't go directly into the water. It was at a 14-degree angle. Okay, well, it would have broken up then, and there would have been debris everywhere. One more thing I'll do just for you, Moneypenny, is I'll go into the debris, because the next thing everybody asks, well, what about the debris that was found? No debris was found by the official search, which was the most expensive and extensive in history. The official search found nothing, not one single piece. The debris that was found by third parties. Most of it was found by Blaine Gibson, which was also from the Netflix documentary. People actually tried to cast doubt on him, claim he's some kind of agent. Jeff Wise tried to claim he was working for Russia or something like that. The impression I got from him is he's just a normal guy. So the debris is actually fully consistent with the story that I've put forth, that there was a lithium-ion battery fire, and this plane was quote-unquote disintegrating, falling apart. There's only a tiny amount of debris. If you add it all up together, and there's a CNN picture that you can look at, it's less than 1% of the whole plane. It's essentially nothing. In addition to that, some of the debris had burn marks on it, and that just got totally dismissed as well. So we've got 10, 15 witnesses that all are adding up to a lithium-ion battery scenario, and we've got burn marks on some of the debris that washed up, and a B-77 fire suppression device washed up on the Maldives. And then if you look at that B-77 fire suppression device, there's even a serial number on it. You can actually see. It washed up like a few weeks later. The Maldives was intentionally excluded from the search. They just said, nope, you're not involved in the search. They never looked into that device, even though it probably could have been directly linked to MH370. Especially in a fire scenario, you could see how if they had to pull these things down and manually deploy some of these fire extinguishing devices, you could imagine how one of these might get into the water somehow. The flaperon, which is the piece that essentially quieted everybody, it's missing its unique serial plate. This is a plate that's bolted on to the flaperon, and it's just missing. They matched it to a non-unique serial number, and the media doesn't even talk about that. You can Google it, and you can find out for yourself. I just find a lot of this to be very suspicious. The barnacle growth on a lot of these pieces, highly contested. Didn't have enough barnacle growth for it to be in the water long enough. And there's an equivalent plane that's an exact match of MH370, a 9M MRK that was scrapped in 2013, decades too early, purchased by GA Telesys in October of 2013. So there's plenty of evidence that either the debris is from MH370, consistent with this fire/teleportation scenario that we see, or that it's not MH370 at all. But if it's teleportation that we see, they could have just taken the plane apart and thrown some debris in the water, no problem. Now, with respect to what you were asking about whose technology is it? To me, you have to go back to the people filming it, right? It's the U.S. government. It's not some third party that's doing this, right? The U.S. government's is definitely tracking a rogue 777 in a post 9/11 world. We've shown that they have the satellite directly over the top of the flight path of the Nicobar Islands, and we used amateur trajectories, which are very accurate, to prove that as well with USA 229 sent up in 2011. There's too much intent around it. The drone can't catch up to a 777. It had to have intercepted it. They're filming before the orbs even show up in the video. So they either got super lucky and were just filming this like, hey, let's throw all our intelligence assets and stare at this plane. Oh, look, some orbs just showed up. Sweet. Or it's a U.S. operation and they knew exactly what was going to happen. Even from filming it, there's intent. In the drone video, they're not using the automatic tracking of the plane. They're actually manually tracking it. Someone's like actually moving the video around. That's why it moves out of frame. They zoom in on it to get a really good close look at it. And then right before the black hole, the zap, they zoom out. Like they frame the video. Nobody panics when the plane disappears. They just kind of zoom out and move the camera slightly. I mean, if it's me and I'm watching a plane disappear, I'm moving that thing everywhere and I'm trying to figure out what just happened, right? So does that answer most of your questions? Is that personally, I'm very confident that what we're looking at here is reverse engineered technology. We can actually explain all the science too. It's taken weeks, but it's mostly all explained by room temperature superconductivity. And room temperature superconductivity will change everything about the whole world. It can even enable the black hole that we see produce high levels of energy. Salvatore Pais, who's come up with these patents, I just listened to his podcast that he had with Theory of Everything. And he essentially says that yes, this superconductivity can produce these extremely high levels of energy that are required to even produce the black hole that we see there. And it's all explained by mass reduction. This is what's being held back from the public. I've been told Congress has real scientific papers that unify quanta and macro. And I've looked at Salvatore's paper that I posted on my Twitter called the Superforce. And in my opinion, it also unifies quanta and macro. But the missing link is that they're not showing is this mass reduction. Is that if you can reduce your mass to zero using, let's say, this energy shell that we see around these orbs, then you can defy gravity. And then you can also use that superconductivity to create your own geodesics, your own gravity, that allows them to pull forward while ignoring gravity. This is the missing link here. You create a shell around the plane as well, using the orbs, which we think what they're doing is they're tracking the plane. If you watch them, they're creating this sphere around the plane. My guess is you're doing advanced AI to collect enough information to say, okay, how big does the sphere have to be around the plane? You force this huge amount of energy, create an electromagnetic double-sided barrier around the plane, and then you reduce its mass to zero. Reduce the mass to zero, now the plane can go infinite speed, light speed, maybe even beyond light speed. So we can explain everything, even from a scientific perspective. Yes, it's advanced science that's not available to the public, but it doesn't require non-human intelligence to happen. Now, the last thing I'll say, and I'll let you guys jump in because I was just kind of going on my little rant here, is that I don't care what people want to believe, right? If people want to believe that that's non-human intelligence, it's too hard. I don't blame them at all. It took me weeks to come to terms with that this might not be non-human intelligence. And I actually think it's potentially harder to believe that it's our technology and that we can be this secretly advanced. And that's why my argument is that it must be from reverse engineering. But there's a lot of implications that come with that. Is if that's the case, how long have we been reverse engineering this stuff? How much of the technology that we're using, that I'm using right now, computer, etc., comes from reverse engineering, you know?
We do know that. We know that. Thank you for that long explanation. And I don't want to take up time, but very briefly, there's an investigative journalist called Ross Coulthard. He wrote a book, In Plain Sight. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but his book extensively looks at reverse engineering and a lot of admissions that were made in 2020 by the US Department of Defense. I'm looking at his book and what he said and what you've shown. And I think there's quite a lot of correlation there. Thank you for what you've done. I don't want to hold up the time, but if you did have time, I would love to ask more questions at some point. Thank you.
Please keep asking questions. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, 100%. And if, I don't know, I can't see if there's hands up, but we can either cycle back to you. I definitely want to hear more questions from you.
Yeah, go ahead. Go with the others. And if there's time,
but yeah, I
that'd
am
be great.
familiar with Ross Coulthard. What I would say too, though, is that what we need to be careful of in general is if this is true, then most likely the government is slow dripping the information to the public. What people talk about is an acclamation process, because this is too much information for people to just take in. I mean, even a lot of my family members simply cannot accept the information that's being presented, right? It's so contrary to what we're told on TV and by mainstream media in general. Even academics just can't accept it because it says that they've been lied to about what's really possible in this earth. And, you know, so I think that if there is an acclamation process, then we really have to question, okay, are the people that are feeding us the information, are they feeding us everything they know, or are they just feeding us little by little, right? And so we have to be very careful if that is the case, if this is true, who we trust and look at their actions. So when you see what I'm doing here and exposing it, you can see there's a very methodical approach. We're approaching it from a scientific perspective. I'm not, trickling any information out. I'm just giving it out as fast as I get it. I'm giving you the whole information. Like if you're watching my stream right now, I have my list of evidence up here that I've been working on for several days. It's 17 pages long, right? And it's all there for the public and for people to read themselves. So if you compare that to people who are out there and telling you, okay, wait next week until the big announcement, right? You can see that there's quite a bit of a difference in terms of intention, in terms of disclosing information. So all I would say is be cautious of what you believe and who it comes from. But yeah, good questions.
Yeah, a really great question, and just a personal statement on all that, which is very relevant. I'm involved in trying to just help facilitate the natural disclosure process, and I respect people for all those working hard in government to make this happen over the years, and it's my just personal belief that the world is ready for the whole thing. I don't know what the whole thing is, but at least the whole truth in terms of what's been going on, in terms of what humans have been able to figure out so far. So my intentions are to assist in this disclosure process in a constructive way, but I'm just one little person, and that's me, Mr. Panda. I'm sorry, Benno. You haven't had a chance yet. Great to see you, Benno. What's your question, sir?
Yeah, hi, great space. And first of all, I just want to thank Ashton for all the hard work that he's done, the time he's given. And
Is Benno talking? He shows as a listener on my thing.
Yes, I can.
Can
you hear me, Panda? I can hear him.
We might have to cycle Panda up and down.
Yeah, we're cycling you, buddy.
Apologies. So first of all, thanks to Ashton, and thank you very much for sharing with us your research. I think we're very lucky to be able to be privy to that. I guess this is something I've grappled with since you brought this perspective to this community. I think from nearly close to day one, I've followed your account, and you've impressed me all the way along. It's scary to put on the hat that this is real, but what's compelling is the evidence you presented to say that this video is real. Just the dates, when it was released. How quickly it was released after the plane went missing. I kind of look at intent as well, and I kind of feel like that perhaps if this is not a deep state fake and this is a genuine, what you see is what you get video, which I'm compelled to believe it is, then there's a notion there that the person who released it, because at the time when I remember like it was yesterday, there's a lot of heightened emotion, and I think it would have been done as a good thing, like perhaps to give perhaps in a roundabout way, perhaps some sort of closure. But I find it difficult to sort of come across to the side that it's our tech. That's just my personal sort of persuasion on it. I kind of feel like we're bystanders in this perhaps, and I think there were multiple assets that were probably used to track this plane when it did go off course. And I believe that I guess it would be in the interest of the person that released the footage not to release 6 hours worth of them tracking it perhaps, but the most poignant part, which was I guess the finale where it disappeared. Recently 60 Minutes did a MH370 anniversary special, and in that they interviewed some amateur radio enthusiasts, and they essentially create a good argument also to say, well, they don't say that it crashed. Like the logic tells them, well, that's where it crashed because that's what you think planes do, right? So, but essentially they've given coordinates which were a little bit different off the arc from the original search area. Does the satellite coordinates that you've established, do they mirror those coordinates, or have you sort of listened to those interviews with those other gentlemen that claim that they've sort of triangulated the last signal, I guess you could say, from the radio waves that they interpreted from their research? Do they line up, if you don't mind me asking?
No, good question. So I think we're probably talking about Richard Godfrey, and that's his whisper route data. And that was actually the first data I looked at. So this investigation has systematically only ruled out data after we've looked at it and found there's no credibility to it, essentially. And the whisper route data was highly contested, even right away. Because the argument that I would give in my earlier spaces is it's like trying to track somebody in a white shirt in a sea of white shirts. So it's kind of like piecing together data, but only if the rest of your data is accurate. So if those Inmarsat pings are accurate after 1840 UTC, which I've looked at them, and there's definitely a huge anomaly at 1840 UTC. I think that very few people have actually looked at the actual Inmarsat pings, honestly. A lot of people talk about them, but they don't really actually go look at them. If that is real, though, then what they're trying to do is they're trying to recreate a flight path using this like radar pings that hit these various airports and locations. And the problem with that is that I looked through all 300 pages of the Whisper route. And there's definitely sometimes where like they didn't have detections and they're just guessing, right? And they're trying to piece together this game of telephone. Now the problem is the moment you have one thing that's wrong, now your whole route's just a guess, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, they've looked at throughout the whole 7th arc. They've searched everywhere. The black box search indicates that as well. They're never going to find a plane down there. I'm 100% confident. And it's not like it's 2015 anymore. You know, it's 2023. It's 9 years later. We searched everywhere. So all these experts, and I've interacted with many of them, if not all of them at this point. Half of them blocked me early on, which I think is a good indicator that they're not being very scrupulous in general. You know, I think they're clinging to this hope or this idea that somehow 10 rows on an Excel data spreadsheet is more accurate than 15 eyewitnesses. And the big problem is there's no eyewitnesses in the Southern Indian Ocean. Like we pointed out, this is an active shipping route. So how did nobody see this, right? People would have seen this plane. Somebody would have seen it. They would have seen this debris field. So they have to use a lot of specious logic in order to come to this conclusion that this plane crashed down there. So ultimately, we ended up throwing out the Whisper route. And it was actually a big point in the investigation. Because I, before all this, was somebody who wasn't even into conspiracies in general. So I just thought this ping data had to be accurate, had to be interpreted correctly, that the Whisper route had to be this amazing thing. So I actually assumed there was a minus sign in front of our coordinates in our satellite video, even though it didn't really make sense in retrospect, because the minus sign actually put the plane going directly through the Whisper route, like exactly in the Southern Indian Ocean. That was the first smoking gun to me was, oh, okay. So if people do believe in the Whisper route, they should 100% believe these videos are real, because it has the plane going directly through the Whisper route in the Southern Indian Ocean at like 6 in the morning. Now, the problem was we looked at the satellite there. We found USA 229 actually was there. It was there about 30 minutes before 1840 UTC at around 1810, 1850 UTC. So early on, the MH370X team was wondering, can a plane teleport twice? Because we're trying to figure out how does it get there? It can't get there. Like we have it there at 1840 UTC, which is like, you know, 2:30, 2:15 in the morning. But the Whisper route data has it there at 6 in the morning. So I had our satellite expert be like, hey, when's the satellite going to be there again? And it's not there again for like 12 more hours. These low Earth orbit satellites rotate around the Earth every 90 minutes, but they don't rotate in the exact same spot. They like kind of shift a little bit due to the rotation of the Earth. So it didn't make any sense. But then when we realized that we were able to look at the coordinate shifts and map the coordinate shifts out, and we were trying to figure out, okay, could it be inverted, the coordinate shifts? But the coordinate shifts are going to be, there's no way to invert the coordinate shifts, right? That whatever we see from the coordinate shifts don't depend on what we're visually seeing in the video. So that was able to tell us that, okay, either this plane is going south into the east or it's going north into the east if it's got inverted on it. But if it's going north into the east, the plane would need to turn right. If it's going south into the east, the plane is turning left. In both of our videos, the plane is turning left. So what that means is it has to be going south into the east. That means there can't be a minus sign. That means what we're looking at here has to be the Nicobar Islands. So we just used basic logic and reasoning. We were able to figure out the Nicobar Islands. And that's when the case exploded open. That's when we found the witness there. That's when we found out, oh, turns out the satellite's right there at the exact same time now. It goes up to the northeast a little bit, 1840 UTC. Satellite's staring right down in the Nicobar Islands coordinates. This is when everything opened up. Then we found out about the fire scenario, found out about all the other witnesses. I could never make any of this stuff up. But what I did realize early on is that if these videos are real, which I was fairly certain early on they were, that all the evidence would theoretically support it, right? You would be able to find this. I didn't think we'd be able to find this much evidence, though. This is far more than I ever thought in my wildest dreams we would come across. And that's why I tell people, we have more evidence here than any court case in the history of the world. We could convict anyone of anything at this point based on these videos. Well, not anything, but you get my drift, right? I mean, I like to compare it to the Alex Murdaugh trial that recently happened, although I don't like saying his name because I don't think he's a great person. And that's just my opinion. But they convicted this guy with no videos, just on circumstantial evidence alone. We have 2 videos, 10 witnesses. We know the time, the assets. We have a satellite that's staring down. Like, how much more do you need? I even have the name of the leaker, which I'm like 99.9% sure he's the guy. So all we need is attention. We have plenty of evidence stacked up. I know that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but I see you, giving the 100%. So, Benno, thank you for that question. Appreciate it. And if you have any follow-up, I'd be happy to take it.
Well, I certainly do, and agreeing with you 100%. And again, thank you for all your hard work. I'm very grateful for what you do, and I think you're sort of holding, bringing a bit of transparency to whereas we didn't have it before. I guess my other question would be, I remember the passengers' families being able to call their phones. Was there any data? Like, there's a lot of things that we heard. There were a lot of leads, I guess, if you think back, that were coming through the media at the time, and then they were never sort of followed up. I thought that's sort of one area where they could actually probably extract data as far as triangulating phone signals, et cetera, et cetera. And with all those different phones and all those different family members claiming the same thing, I thought there has to be some sort of substance to that. And also, I'd also like to know quickly, why do you think it's our tech? Like, do you entertain that it possibly could be not our tech and that we're perhaps just observing this and they somehow that we're just not so much right place, right time? Like, as I said, like, it would make sense if this thing was taken early on in the piece. Like, I kind of think to myself, like, if it was taken over, if the plane was taken over shortly after it took off, essentially the pilots lost control of the plane, because I guess a lot of other UAP stories, especially, well, most of them in aeroplanes, helicopters even, I've heard witnesses recount their events where they basically lost control of their plane, and the UAP take control of their plane, but obviously on this occasion something's gone a bit further, that they haven't come back to tell us what happened, so to speak, whereas these other people did. So I'm curious about that as far as the phone calls from the families, and is there any have you done any sort of more investigative some research as far as sort of like the telco companies and the potential there with data that could be sort of pulled from that? If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, there's not much we can do about private company stuff, right? And interesting enough, it seems like they didn't look into that at all, which is a little bit suspicious, right? Because I agree, you should theoretically have been able to track that. And, at the time, I guess everyone just assumed, it had to crash into the ocean, so we can just ignore that, right? But, that doesn't really make a lot of sense now in retrospect. It's like, you should have at least done your diligence, because if they're calling, like, how are you just dismissing that, right? And it's kind of the same as the Rolls-Royce engine data. It's like the Rolls-Royce engine data will expose the lie for sure, because this stuff is sending the data like the same way that pacemakers do wirelessly, right? So there's no way that they didn't have that data. And so probably that got covered up to corroborate this South Indian Ocean narrative. I don't think that data has ever been publicly released. And the radar data and the Inmarsat pings took weeks. So if there's a situation where you're trying to be honest about what happened, why are you waiting weeks to release it? They should have been releasing that data the next day. I would argue that the Inmarsat pings have less chain of custody than our videos have. With respect to some of your other questions, there's still mystery. Could still be espionage somehow that started this fire as opposed to just random events. It could still be non-human intelligence. I was talking with somebody on a podcast recently, and they were sure it had to be non-human intelligence. They kind of like you said, they lean towards that. And I said, doesn't matter to me. Like, either way, we're disclosing the same thing here, right? I'm arguing it's reverse engineered our tech. They're arguing it's non-human intelligence. One leads to the other leads to the other one, right? So, I've been pretty clear. It doesn't matter to me what people believe in general. I'm just getting the evidence out there. To me, it's a matter of it's just too coincidental. Why are they filming? The drone's there in the right places. Clearly, these are the SIGINT systems that are connected here, signals intelligence. And you could argue, okay, they're doing that to track this rogue plane. But to me, you're not sending out the signals intelligence team and all these satellite assets. Like, you're doing that because you want to film the event and get intelligence on the technology that you are deploying, so that you can, use it later for intelligence purposes and to maybe refine it. To me, the bigger argument is it a weapons test? Is it a test, or is it proven technology? I think that one person made a good argument that, well, if the plane's doomed anyway, and everybody's going to die if it crashes, then maybe there's an initiative that says, okay, it's doomed anyway, we can fire off our test, right? Because even if it goes poorly, it's collateral damage, right? At that point, they weren't gonna make it anyway, which is pretty morbid. I personally like to think in the good in people and think that maybe there's a thing that says, okay, if this plane is doomed and 230 people are gonna die, we have a thing that says we can go ahead and use the classified technology to save them, right? But I don't know, kind of depends. Now, the other big thing of why it's not necessarily non-human intelligence, in my opinion, is that I am very skeptical of aligning human motivations to non-human intelligence. What we can see here is that whatever technology is being deployed seems to be to save the passengers to some degree, because otherwise they're already doomed anyway. I don't think that a non-human intelligence is going to give a crap about us. If they're so advanced, it's like telling us, like, are you going to go out and try to save every ant that you see? No, you're just stepping on it because it's in your way, right? So that's part of the problem that I have with that. But if you do believe in like benevolent non-human intelligence, sure, that can come back into play. So that's, again, why it all kind of depends on what you believe in personally. And this actually goes back to what Moneypenny was asking about the motivation. I don't think this is about money. It can't really be about goods either. Just way too high of a risk. I mean, we see what happened here. These videos got leaked. Potentially all this technology will now be leaked to Russia, China, and I think they would have already figured it out. If I can figure this out from a Twitter account 9 years later, they probably figured it out years and years ago, right? But to the point there, what is worth it is the intellectual property. There were 20 free-scale semiconductor engineers and scientists on board this plane. That's way too many people for one plane. Most companies have a rule. You can only have 3 or 4 people from the same plane on board. And these people were going to improve the factories or something in China. 9 or 8 of them were Chinese nationals, 12 were Malaysian nationals, even though they work for an American company. We found a 2005 National Security Agency report I actually wrote it up calling free-scale superconductors, because the National Security Report was about commercial emergence of superconductivity, not just superconductivity, room temperature superconductivity, which is the exact technology that I just explained we're seeing in the videos from the orbs and potentially how they're inducing the black hole. So to me, we found a direct link between the scientists and engineers on board and the government. That report even says the technology might be available by 2010 to 2012, but only if the government intervenes with funding. So to me, this says now we have our direct connection. Either they're preventing these people from getting to China, or because they're going to give this technology to China, or they're taking them, they're saving them because they need them, because they're essential. There was also a microchip that apparently Freescale Semiconductors just sent to me today by a person I did a podcast on, that was a very advanced microchip. And he was actually telling me on the podcast that he had heard they were developing room temperature superconductor microchips that would be used in quantum computers. Again, connection from superconductivity once again. And I think that was actually probably part of that report, honestly. So to me, that's your motivation right there. It's not about some patents that are going to revert. That was a red herring. Like, that's not how the patents work. They're owned by the company already anyway. So even though that might have been a side motivation, to me, it's about saving these engineers.
Yes, and great description. And, if we're going to look at the NHI motivation, which is obviously hard to do as just, human beings, but if we were to attempt it anyway, the part to me that seems to be the most non-intuitive as far as in terms of why the cameras were all there in the drone, the 2 satellites and the drone right at the right place at the right time when a non-human group of entities perhaps swarm this thing. That would imply some kind of very strange collusion on part of our government and the non-human beings, the orbs. So I have trouble piecing that together in my mind in terms of any sort of motivation.
Yeah, there's a couple questions too. Actually, I guess I should monitor the chat as much as possible. So they didn't roll it out in 30 minutes. They have 1 hour and 20 minutes to roll it out. That drone has to be stationed somewhat nearby. It's not coming from Diego Garcia military base. It's too far away. But we found that there is these little bases that are joint owned between India and the United States along those Nicobar Islands where the drone could have been deployed from. Now, I haven't written this up, but there was a Reddit piece that someone dug deep into where these were all located, and there's plenty of spaces nearby where this drone could have come from. The satellite is only going to be in the right location there for several minutes, which would also indicate that this was a waypoint that they told the plane to go to, where they could get this type of intelligence. So again, either they're super lucky, or this was a planned operation. And to me, it's not going to be any other country. Or the other theory is sometimes people do is that I call it the Wakanda theory, that there's some hyper advanced third party, nation state out there that we don't know about. There's just not really any evidence for that, right? And it's hard to understand why the U.S. government would hide any scenario that involves a third party country or any type of thing like that.
Do you think it could be the Naval Research Laboratory themselves? Because I looked them up, and apparently, they have a plasma division. Essentially, not only are they, in charge of the satellites, but they have their own plasma physics division that conducts a broad theoretical and experimental program of basic and applied research in plasma physics, laboratory discharge, and space plasmas. So the fact that they sort of work with that technology, it will kind of lend credence to exactly to what you're saying, that this is perhaps their doing.
I think if anyone, it has to be connected to the United States government, in my opinion, whoever's doing it. So, if it's a, kind of someone who's connected to them, sure, theoretically. But, when I look at how advanced this equipment is, whoever owns this technology controls the world. So you kind of have to feed that in together. So either it's the U.S. government themselves, that makes sense. They're theoretically the most powerful advanced country in the world, or it's somebody that's directly affiliated with them, right? Or, there's a lot of other kind of what I call hybrid scenarios, right? So if you want to believe the non-human intelligence scenario, is this a, they're working together kind of situation? I try to stick to the more simple kind of solutions in general. But again, it really just depends on whatever you want to believe in your own personal understanding. Good questions though, Benno. Should we get up some other people as well? And Ross,
For sure, yeah.
Go ahead. Mello, I'm not sure. I can't pull people up or anything, so I don't know. You may have to handle that part.
Yeah, no problem. We'll keep the conversation going.
Well, just while you're getting other people up, can I just also, last question, so I'm sorry to bombard you, but the Fred Valentich case, I found that to be very similar. That's more, there's an audio clip, although the Australian authorities actually never released the audio, but they released a transcript, and that transcript, essentially, he says when he's radioing back to Melbourne, he describes what you could essentially say we see in this video. And that was over, back in the 70s, right? So I think it was back in 1974, maybe. Maybe it was later. I'm not too sure on the date. But again, the Fred Valentich case is just very similar. And also I think that the fact that with disclosure, they're kind of sort of spruiking spheres. That's sort of of all the sort of objects or shapes that they've sort of officially come out with so far, one has been the spheres. So I'm just curious on your thoughts there. Do you see any similarities there, any sort of connection there, perhaps? And have you looked into the Fred Valentich case? Because I always found that to be that was sort of really formally the most sort of, I guess, if you're looking for sort of hardcore evidence historically about UFOs and abductions or people going missing in aeroplanes, I guess that's probably the most was the most up until now evidentiary type sort of case that we had on record, because you literally had the guy radioing back saying, "Hey, I have got this sphere. It's orbiting my plane," were his words, which again describes what we see in the video with the MH370. I just thought there's a lot of similarities there, and I think if you look into his case as well, what I found curious about his case was that week before he went missing, he made a comment to his girlfriend and told her, and I've listened to her. It's hearsay again, but I've listened to her actually state this on video, where he said, if a UFO landed tomorrow, I would go with you. And he was read in on, from a military perspective, he was shown some papers down in Victoria at a barracks, right? 2 weeks before he went missing, he was privy to some information regarding this technology, whatever it may be. But he mentioned it to his girlfriend and mentioned it to his father as well. And then a week later makes that strange comment to her, and then a week later, his plane goes missing. I just think that there's a connection there. I think there's a little connections there, little breadcrumbs that I guess sort of may help tie together, or that identify who's behind this potentially.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, honestly, I get a lot of different things that could be connected. Probably more than half a dozen or a dozen. Go anything from the Philadelphia experiment to several other videos that also show orbs spinning around them. And I can't say one way or another. What I will say is that from the investigation standpoint, I can't really connect it to anything else or any other conspiracies either. We have to keep the investigation pure and make sure that all the evidence is really strong so that we can't be discredited from linking it to anything else. But absolutely, I think the goal here is that if we can show that these videos are real, it opens the door to all these other cases, right, that are very similar and can lend credibility to those cases as well. Whereas right now, they potentially just get ignored or people don't give them any credit, or people see, a lot of people, some people talk to me that some of the most emotional moments I've had with people is that, they tell me, like, I see these lights outside my sky outside and I just want to know what they are, is what people tell me. And I want to tell those people, like, your sightings should not be dismissed. People, people should look into what you're seeing and give you the closure that you want. But I don't have those answers. I don't have another situation where we have two high quality military videos like we do right now. So absolutely, there could be connections. And that's what I hope, that with getting the truth to these videos, that we can, get people looking at other stuff that is, out there, mysterious, unusual, that could be similar, and just other esoteric things in general. Good question.
Yeah, well said. I mean, yeah, disclosure, to many of us, it's about just keep, pushing open the door further and further to more possible understanding about all these things. Chris Hunter, wonderful to have you with us. What's your question?
Howdy, thanks. 2 points I wanted to bring up. Such a high value plane with people on board. I almost wonder if it's
Chris,
tampering
we
with the
can't
time.
hear you. Sorry, Chris is a colleague of mine.
Well, isn't that nice? Well,
Awesome.
Pleasure to have both of you here.
Welcome, Chris.
Hi, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Keep going.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm wondering if maybe it's a tampering with the timeline to stifle the innovation and the science they were going to bring about, and in order to stop that. The other thing is I thought I read some information about when Crimea happened. Obama
Chris,
was
we can't hear you. Or at least I can't.
Yeah, we can hear. Let's cycle Penny up, down, and up if you can, Mello. Keep going.
Yeah, we'll fix this. Just hang in there.
Penny, dude, turn around 3 times counterclockwise.
No, yeah, you're good. Real quick, Chris, on your thing, and then I'll let you do the second part of your question. The espionage scenario definitely is still in play. So with respect to, are they trying to slow the timeline down? Like if these scientists were going to China, then really what we're dealing with here is a shadow war for control of the technology. And this used to be the theory I was on early on. If you watch my Confessionals podcast, which was the first one I did in person, I was trying to figure out if this is a UFOlogy explanation or if this is an espionage explanation. And my argument there was that whoever controls this technology controls the world. So you could argue that even pushing them back 10 years would be worth it, right? Because as we've seen here, as we've talked about, even just warp nukes is enough to be a huge deterrent. And I could see why that would be enough of a reason to prevent these people from getting to China with that intellectual property that would put them on par with whoever else may have it, like the United States. So that's a great thing. Go ahead.
I wonder if there's something on board that had to disappear also, like some kind of technology or documentation that they had to make sure that nobody else got a hold of, because the whole thing just disappearing would answer that question. The other thing was when Crimea happened, where they had some missiles, surface to air missiles go off back when Obama was in, and the plane hit the ground and people were killed. And I remember seeing footage of the bodies and stuff, and they were saying that they thought they were from the same flight that we're talking about now, but none of the bodies had blood in them. They were drained of blood. And I thought that was fucking weird, because you could see that they didn't have any blood in them. There was no anything anywhere. So just saying that, I don't know.
Yeah, my official stance, I've heard that a lot. I think that people have to be careful about, okay, we've got a huge conspiracy here, but that doesn't mean that everything's linked together. I think that in general, conspiracy theories have this tendency to try to all be linked together because everyone wants to see patterns everywhere. The reality is MH17 was shot down by a Buck missile launcher by a Russian separatist general. I was actually online the day that it happened when they posted the picture bragging about it on Facebook, which they deleted 15 minutes later when they found out that they killed a passenger plane full of people. There was a different number of people on board that plane compared to MH370. Most of those passengers were Dutch. So if you saw some videos, I would probably be highly skeptical of whether or not those were actually the bodies from the plane that actually crashed, because I don't think that those people would have been filming the bodies that they had just shot down. Right. So if you saw those videos, and I don't know if the inspectors, like the third party, were even allowed to come and take a look at it because it was such a politically hot topic. So I would just say be skeptical of trying to connect everything together. This investigation will not be connecting anything to MH17 or any other conspiracies at all. But you're allowed to believe whatever you want.
And I didn't say I believed it. I just said I heard about this and it didn't seem connected, but I was just making sure that I brought forward everything that I had heard.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So, yeah, and that's just my official stance on that. So I just have to be consistent about it, and it does come up quite a bit. So I felt like it's important to mention it, and I'm not trying to put you down or nail you down to that. Or
no,
like that.
I agree with you. There's no actual factual connection to it whatsoever, so it shouldn't be looked at. So I agree.
Good questions, though. Do you have any other follow-up? Penny, can you hear us again now?
Yes, for some reason I couldn't get back into the space. I don't know what happened, but I'm very sad. I missed Chris's question. I'll have to listen to the replay.
Yeah, it was mostly on could there be an espionage angle? And he also asked about the cargo. So we've looked into the cargo a lot. I've talked to some of the official investigators that started early on, or not necessarily the official ones, but the people that investigated early on. And the cargo is very mysterious. We do know about the lithium-ion batteries were on board. And these lithium-ion batteries, we're not sure if they're regular lithium-ion batteries, military lithium-ion batteries. Might be something going on with respect to those as well, but it's really hard to get any definitive data because all we have is this manifest related to the cargo, and then we have the official ATSB report.
I noticed there was only one American passenger who was an IBM employee. I presume you know about him.
Yeah, Philip Wood. Philip Wood is linked to quite a few different things on board related to this case.
Well, there's a bizarre story, isn't there, about him hiding something, taking a photograph that turned out black. Very strange, yeah.
Yeah, that one was supposed to the 4chan picture that had EXIF data that pointed to Diego Garcia, where he claimed that he was being held prisoner and he was drugged, and that he hid the phone up his butt, prison style. Interesting enough, that picture got debunked by the same people that supposedly debunked our videos that we rebunked and proved that debunk was incorrect. And we also proved that the Philip Wood debunk was incorrect as well. I found a very detailed analysis that shows that it was not inconsistent with how a picture would look, interestingly enough.
And also the interesting thing is, I think it was about the same people. British intelligence approached Mark Dugan, the French guy in the Netflix, who was formerly Proteus Airlines CEO, I think he was. So I wonder, do you know who that British intelligence person? Do you know anything about them?
I wish I knew all of that. I've only got involved in this case 10 weeks ago, so my knowledge is, looking back on internet articles and things like that, a lot of stuff from the archives has been deleted, stuff like that. I am familiar with Mark Dugan, who is the French author who wrote about it, said the plane went to Diego Garcia. That seems to be where everybody thought the plane went and supposedly was told to stop looking into it. The big thing about everybody thinking it went to Diego Garcia is they thought it was remote controlled there. I think Jim Stone also mentioned it. There's a lot of there was even some remote viewers that pointed it to there. Our witness, Catherine T. in 2008, thought that it went there. A number of other conspiracies also thought it went there. Everything pointed at the base. And it makes sense. This base is in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Commercial airliners can't land there. We showed that we found an article from Facebook that dates all the way back to the time of the plane that there were no departures 72 hours after that from Diego Garcia.
And it's British territory, isn't it? It's a US military base on British territory. I'm worried about the British connection here. And the reason I'm mentioning it as well is the Malaysian government, the Malaysian police, the Malaysian airline staff, remarkably tight-lipped on all of this.
Yeah. And the base as well, I'm a little skeptical to talk about because even myself, people have told me this base is more secretive than Area 51 by magnitudes. And what I also heard is it's not necessarily about aliens, not about non-human intelligence, but just all kinds of stuff that they're doing. I would imagine if this is our technology that we're seeing in these videos, that's where you test it, right? It's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I
It's
believe
built on
that
a
is
ridge.
the most likely scenario from everything at this stage. But yeah, thank you just for all the hard work you've done on it. It's amazing, and I'm going to keep on it.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you there and paying attention, especially people who are, prestigious, who've been working with the BBC in the past and stuff like that. It's a tough world we live in these days. And what comes with these videos is a very real disinformation campaign to keep them quiet. They've kept these videos quiet for 9 years, and it's possibly only now that we have the basis to understand them. Those 2007 DoD, Navy, declassified videos that show UAPs, those showed us what FLIR footage looked like, what drone footage even looked like. Before that, I would have no idea. So when I saw the FLIR footage, our thermalized MQ-1C Gray Eagle in 2014, I didn't even know what I was looking at. A lot of people, when they first look at the satellite picture, the video, they think they're looking up instead of down. That's how little of a basis we have to understand what satellite video might look
I come
like.
from an RAF family. My father was in the Royal Air Force and then worked at GCHQ, which is a few minutes from where I'm currently sitting, the head of CIA, MI5, MI6, and all the rest of it. And I can tell you the military activity around here at the moment, I would not put anything past the the technology that they currently have.
Yeah, and I think another argument, circumstantial, of course, is that a lot of these Western countries never get attacked. We have all these wars happening, but no one's really messing with the big boys, right? The big allied West. And I would argue that the technology might be part of the reason, because anyone who has this technology can end the war in a second. You can take out the other people's world leaders and whenever you want. And some people come and counter back and say, well, if we have this technology, why haven't we just taken over the world? But I think that's a very myopic view. Is that there comes, like, you go
Kim Jong-un's got a bigger button and his hacking infrastructure is a little larger, I would suspect.
And even if you take him out, then what? Right? Now you have to deal with the entire North Korean population. It's not like they're just going to fall in line, right? And you have to replace them with someone else.
They might do if we feed them.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good point, honestly. And so, some of it, yeah, sure, you might. But also, like you pointed out, could be that they also have technology. What if they can warp nuke us right back? Right now, we're in the same situation where we began with, where everybody's got nukes, and first person to fire it off is going to end the world, right? So, there's a lot of arguments why you might say that we wouldn't utilize this type of technology, not deploy it. But what it also means is a lot of these wars that are happening are, small potatoes. They're just happening for money purposes or small land grabs, things like that. They're just proxy wars that are going on where nobody's really deploying their real technology that could end these in any minute. And to me, that's sad because there's real loss of life that's happening, in the Ukraine, in Israel, Palestine situation. I personally feel like we should be able to come together over this technology, find common ground, new purpose as humanity to try to change our world for the better. And that's what I see when I watch these videos. I see hope. And I hope other people do too.
Well, I certainly hope for the same thing. Hey, Ashton.
Hey, how's it going? Was that
hey, it's Noah, the one who... Yeah, I'm the one that posted your... Oh, yeah. Good.
Oh, it's Noah.
I was just saying... Yeah, I'm the one that posted your stuff on Reddit that got you kicked off for 7 days. I'm sorry. I wish that hadn't happened. I kept saying last time.
No, I want to be clear about that too. So I don't care about getting banned from Reddit at all. And I think you should post my content there. I think you shouldn't be afraid or get bullied into taking it down. It's very important as well, right? Is don't let them bully you. Like, what can they do to you about posting someone else's content? That's the whole point of Reddit, right?
I don't understand why you got banned and I didn't, though. And that's what just because I guess they were hiding what was true.
What they claimed is that I think in the UFOs subreddit, that's the most controlled subreddit possibly of all of Reddit, honestly. But in that subreddit, I think I called out the moderators or something and said how could they corrupt or something like that, or how I said that the subreddit's corrupt. And they tried to claim that I was calling out subreddits. It's like, how is a personal attack, or how is it a harassment to call out a whole entire
Is it the r/UFOs with the S at the end?
Yeah, and that's where these videos emerge. And the reason why we know it's corrupted is that's the place where they silence them too, right? And, that's the place where the Icy Slide account is the one that posted the VFX debunk. Someone actually recently figured out that Icy Slide just stands for IC Slide, which stands for Intelligence Community Forum Slide. And that's actually a disinformation, forum sliding is actually a disinformation mechanism. is that that's exactly what they did, ironically enough, is that you bot upvote the content you want to be seen. You don't defend it. The account was a 1-day-old account. They didn't defend the argument at all. They didn't make any posts in the comments at all. They got manual approval by the moderators to allow that to be posted. They had to approve it. I asked the moderators myself if they knew who the person was, and they wouldn't respond, which I think is pretty telling in general, because you can see how much they've came down on me, but they're not going to come down on a 1-day-old account that has no karma, that shouldn't be allowed to make any posts. And forum sliding is you push it to the top, and now everybody just believes whatever's at the top of Reddit, right? Whatever the most upvoted comments are, that's what people believe. Good point. Too. All the upvoted comments were, "Thank God this is over. Thank God this is proven to be a hoax." It's like, that's so disingenuous, right? And the worst part is the VFX didn't even match. As a matter of fact, it didn't match. It's not an opinion. It literally did not match. And that's the scariest part, is the only factual argument they were making was false. And so that just shows that, like, how powerful disinformation is. In fact, that might be one of my upcoming pieces, is called Disinformation, just going over manufactured consensus and social contagion. Because I personally believe that Reddit is the #1 source of misinformation on the entire planet. And it might even be the #1 radicalizer of terrorists on the planet at the moment.
Well, a lot of the things that get pushed to the top do become the main story of that subreddit for weeks and weeks. You're right about that. But you're not going to find any corruption, I hope, in UFOB. Because
that's why your subreddit even has to exist, though, right? Like, why should that subreddit even have to exist? It has to exist because of what I'm talking about. Is that people realize that these larger subreddits, they get controlled. And once they get controlled, now you can't have real discourse anymore. And so then people have to make alternate versions, right? UFOB. And so I think that the niche subreddits like that are still pretty good. But the bigger they get, then they get targeted for control, right? And it doesn't take much to get control of them. And once they have control, then they can control the narrative. And as long as they have the UFO subreddit, they don't really care about the UFOB subreddit until things like you have happen, right? Where you posted my content, it got over 1,500 upvotes. Now they care.
And then I was forced to basically remove it.
Yeah, and then you get forced to remove it, right?
I'm still talking with the mods about adding your stuff back. I want to find a reason to validify or validate. I mean, what you said about the research. I've been telling them, yeah, you seem all right, you seem legitimate. The other mods on the sub, I've been talking to them in the Discord, and they seem to not to have any problem with you. Just that the sub was being rampaged on by people from new debunking subreddits. Honestly, when I posted that stuff, like after a few hours, people started to hop in.
And again, you gotta just be strong, man. You gotta ignore it, right? And again, that's why the social contagion works. Is that humans are a very social species. We want to appease other people, right? But the truth doesn't care about who you're appeasing. You know, it doesn't care about what consensus believes. And we shouldn't. The truth is not based on consensus, and that's part of the problem. Is that we've gotten to a post-truth world where the truth is whatever the majority believes, and that's how we've gotten to this point where we can't believe these videos. It's
not even truth.
You know?
Yeah, I was told a few times I have very thin skin, but it's getting a little thicker, and I'm just trying to do the right thing, and hopefully that involves being able to get your content back on there without any problems, and hopefully you won't get like banned or whatever again. I really don't want that. You do seem very genuine with your findings and your research, and you seem to know what you're talking about, actually, even though people may not agree. And
yeah, it doesn't matter for me. I think that if you want to do that, you should find a piece that you think is very compelling, something that's honest and compelling to you, and then post it there. I mean, there's several people that are posting my content, and I just tell them, you know, feel free. I don't feel like they're stealing my content. I don't really care if they post it on Reddit.
Yeah. My problem is that you're the one that got banned because it was my fault, and I just...
No, that's not your fault. I want to be clear about that. So I didn't get banned because of you in any way, shape, or form. That's not why
it was your comments, you said, right?
Yeah, and my comments in the UFO subreddit is the reason why I got banned. It wasn't even related to UFOB in general. So you should not feel like that's on you at all. So what happened was, for people who are just listening who don't know, when we figured out the fire scenario and we saw the heat signature underneath the plane that's right at where the exhaust vents are, we were able to realize, wow, we can actually prove the fire scenario. And I made a post about it.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, one sec. Once I'm finished.
Yeah,
Let me finish first. So, yes, so we realized that. And then my post about it got posted on 3 or 4 different subreddits. Got posted on conspiracy subreddit, UFO subreddit, UFOB subreddit. And it took off on all of them, except for actually the UFOs subreddit is the one where it got the least amount of upvotes. It became number 1 on conspiracy, number 1 on UFOB subreddit. And I felt like I needed to go in there and answer questions, because a real person goes and answers questions for people. The Icy Slide account didn't answer one question, right? And so I started answering questions. And of course it's Reddit. So there's so many toxic people, right? People being just the worst people that you could possibly imagine. And so I pushed back a little bit, and that's what they want you to do, right? Because they're looking for an excuse to ban me, because it comes down to narrative control. You can't brainwash people if someone's out there telling the truth. So that's just kind of the long and short of it. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking about the fact that you said something about macroscopic decoherence, and nobody really that I know knows what that is. And I was hoping to, if you want to delve into it, talk about what that means and how it could have something had happened to the plane, but we don't know where it went or when it went or whatever it went, even.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, I was thinking about that before.
So if we want to
go
talk
ahead.
about the science, I think that's a good thing to dig into. Is that first of all, superconductivity is the secret to everything. It's the secret sauce. It's the key that allows everything else to happen. And if you've reached a superconductive state, then you are theoretically achieving the quantum properties, but at the macroscopic level. Now, from a quantum experiment, we can look at the double slit experiment, okay? And the double slit experiment is the most mysterious experiment in all of physics. If we shoot a photon, think of it like shooting an atom through one of 2 slits. We look at the pattern that it forms to figure out which slit it went through. So what happens when we shoot the photon through the 2 slits? Surprisingly, we get a wave pattern, an interference pattern. We don't get 2 slits on our detector. So how can that be? It has to go through one of the slits, right? How can it go through both at the same time? We call this wave-particle duality. So what's our logical next step? Let's take a look. Let's try to figure out which one did it go through. Let's look. Set up a detector to look. What happens? The wave function breaks down. Now there's just 2 slits on our detector. How is that possible? Is the universe aware of itself? Does it know that we're looking? This is why it's the biggest mystery in all of physics.
Doesn't that give credence to consciousness across the universe or some kind of God?
You know, and I think everybody can look at it differently. To me, it says the universe is conscious of itself. It's aware of what's going on. But when we break it down, this is what gives rise to quantum entanglement, non-locality, and quantum teleportation. Because non-locality is essentially being able to tell information faster than the speed of light. If I change something over here, I instantly know what happened somewhere that's very, very far away. And this is what China has proved several times. And so that's quantum entanglement, right? And somehow we're able to transfer information faster than the speed of light. Now, what macroscopic decoherence is reverting that. So if you think about what that would mean, it's taking something that is at a probabilistic point, our wave pattern, converting it to a deterministic point when we look at it, one of 2 points. Reverse that, and now you're going from a deterministic point to a wave pattern, a probabilistic point. Now you can break it down even more, and I think that what we're really looking at is solid state Bose-Einstein condensate. So Bose-Einstein condensate is if we supercool certain elements like lithium-6, it changes its properties, and it achieves the properties of quanta. And what that allows it to do is achieve that wave function status that we see. It can do things that it would not be able to do. So fermions can turn into bosons. A fermion is anything that has solid structure to it. And the reason for that is fermions have to be in different places at the same time in space-time. So if I have a cup in front of me, it's made of fermions. The reason why it doesn't collapse when I pick it up is because all those fermions have to be in different points. Bosons don't have that limitation. Like a laser
Isn't this
beam.
just the same thing as matter manipulation / creation, kind of?
It's similar, perhaps. I don't know much about that in general. But here's the thing.
Me
So
neither.
bosons allow you to collapse them all down. Bosons do not have the limitation of being at a different point. They can all collapse onto the same point. That's what happens when you have a Bose-Einstein condensate, is now it can convert to bosons, where now they can collapse onto one another. So if we can do that to lithium and convert it from fermions to bosons and then potentially back again, Now you're kind of talking about teleporting something or converting it to a wave function and then turning it back. So the same idea can theoretically apply to our plane, at least in theory. Now, another way of looking at it is that if we can convert the plane to a quantum state from a solid, not from a liquid or gas, from a gas or a plasma, but from a solid state, and we can take its mass and reduce it to zero. So turn it from fermions into bosons and put it down to a single point where now it has no mass. Now you can accelerate at the speed of light, or you can move at the speed of light. The less mass, the faster that you can go. The new analogy that I'm going to start using is a fly or an ant. When you watch a fly or an ant, they move extremely fast for how tiny they are. Relative to our size, they're moving much quicker than we are. The answer there is the same. The less mass, the faster you go. And not just the faster you go, the faster time goes. And we can apply this both to small things and to large things. The reason why we have curvature is that the less mass, the faster time's going. The more mass, the slower time's going. So if you have an object that's up in the air, the part that's further away from the Earth is moving faster than the part that's closer to the Earth. What that does, creates curvature. So what that does over time is now that object is going to move closer and closer and closer to the Earth. It's going to converge on it. Another analogy for that would be if both of us are in different parts of the Earth right now, we could be on opposite sides of the Earth. We're both going to walk in a straight line. And even though we're in different points, you would think that those straight lines would never intersect. But if we both walk towards the North Pole, we're going to intersect at the North Pole. The reason why we're going to intersect there is the curvature of the Earth. So does that answer your question in terms of the science behind what we're talking about? And I might not be exact on that.
It definitely gets me thinking.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned to me just now in a DM something about the orbs being an emulation of quanta when you were talking about it with us. I think they're listening in. And yeah, his name is can we get Roy up here? Roy's the one who said that to me.
Yes, Roy, please join us. He's a very qualified person to speak on this.
So I don't even know him yet.
No pressure, Roy. But
I hope I'm not saying it wrong, because Roy's really the expert out there, and I'm just a little amateur here who's trying to do my best to understand these very advanced concepts. But I think that what Roy would say is that time is a fluid symmetry. So we don't need gravity to explain everything. Time and curvature of mass that's kind of bending space-time can explain everything that we see out there. That can also help us simplify our equations and theoretically then allow quanta and macro to coexist and have the same properties. And I think that the secret is we can look up at the stars and we can see these same interactions. And what Roy might say as well is that if we look at neutron stars and the LIGO experiments in terms of gravitational waves, we're not seeing, there is no graviton. There's not a particle that's creating gravity. It's simply a property of mass interacting with space. And to kind of bring back the concept of how time flows, if we look at a black hole, which has a ton of mass, the closer you get to that black hole, the more time will slow down. And a lot of people say if someone's moving towards the black hole, it's going to look like their time is slowing down as they get closer to it. This also confirms the same theory that we're mentioning. And therefore, the less mass, the faster you're going to go as well, the further away you are. Now, this is time dilation. So if we think of the movie Interstellar, this is exactly what happens in the movie. Matthew McConaughey, he goes onto a planet that's circling around a black hole, away from a space station that's much further away. They only go there for about an hour. Their time is moving very slow. They come back to the space station. It's been 20 years for the people that are on the space station. The time for the person on the space station is moving much faster. So this is essentially, in my mind, a very beautiful understanding of how time flows in general, is that time is not a constant. It's fluid. It depends on where you are in your own frame of reference, which is consistent with Einstein.
Makes me think this is how teleportation can be done also. I remember you said that was one of the things that they were hiding from us besides superconductivity and free energy in your letter.
Yep.
I think teleport.
Oh, jump on in. Yeah,
Oh,
let's get some.
yeah. Hold on a second. Thanks. It's been great to hear you speak, Noah, and attempting to chronicle this whole thing, including the Reddit days and the drama there, and all the Discord stuff and everything that's been happening since, of course. So yeah, it's great to get that perspective from you, who is involved in this before I was. But Jiggy, thank you for your patience. You've had your hand up for a while. What's on your mind?
Yeah, no problem. Hey, good to be here, everybody. Good stuff. It's a very interesting case, and I've got just three quick thoughts that I would love to hear comments on, and hopefully maybe new avenues for the investigation. But the first one is something that I guess Moneypenny and others already alluded to, and that is looking at other cases
Sorry, I've
that
been
are similar.
neglecting you guys.
What really caught my eye was I don't remember who posted it. It might have been the Juan, but it was the December 1988 case in Puerto Rico where there was supposedly, allegedly, 100 witnesses seeing a large UFO being chased by 3 fighter jets, and they also observed 3 rotating red orbs that apparently disappeared one or more of these fighter jets. So you have 3, rotating orbs disappearing a plane. I was like, wow, So that's interesting. I don't know if there are other. I'm kind of a data guy, so I kind of was doing a little data mining on that. But I'm sure there's even other cases out there that would be similar. So that might be an interesting avenue. The second thing I have for you is Sean Kirkpatrick, currently of Arrow, hopefully for not long, right? So back in May, I think it was the NASA briefing or hearing where it was mostly, UFOs don't exist, blah, blah, blah. The one thing he did say was, hey, yeah, they don't exist, but we see these metallic orbs globally all over the world with these, maneuvers that
while we're waiting,
we can't explain.
As well for
and so I thought that was very curious that if, out of all
questions, let me know and I can
the
share
UAP,
back into
the UFO
space as well.
literature out there that they brought that up, metallic orbs. And so I was trying to figure that out. And I guess maybe metallic orbs are less intimidating or scary for the public than spaceships with little green men. So that could be the angle. But then I thought of, what if this technology they have, could this be like when disclosure happens, then it's like, hey, yeah, we saved the passengers on that plane. Here they are, in an effort to buy some goodwill after having, covered this thing up for 80 plus years. On a darker interpretation of that could be kind of the MyLabs angle where it's like there's some sort of cooperation with non-human intelligence that has something to do with their interest in collecting people. Let's hope that's not the case. But that would be like, oh, hey, this plane, these people are going to be dead anyway. We're going to take them. So I don't know. Interesting thought. The last thing I have for you, you mentioned the burn marks on the debris. Would it be possible to request, testing on that debris to see if it's specifically, lithium ion burns? I don't know if that's possible. But yeah, thanks for the time. Good space.
Yeah, good questions on that. The way they described the burn marks was they said it was resin, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. I'm not even sure how that logically makes sense. And with respect to the other incidents that are similar, I probably would say the same thing I said earlier, which is that, I'm sure that there's other stuff that's similar that has happened. I feel like it'd be unlikely this would be the first time ever. I think ultimately what it kind of comes down to is it the same? Is it what we're dealing with the U.S. government or another government, or is it non-human intelligence? My opinion is that this technology has to be reverse engineered, that we couldn't have come about it automatically. But when I look at the videos, it looks like we're emulating what we see from UFOlogy. Like it's our version of it. It's a little bit different, not quite the same, but it employs the same technological advancements. Like you see floating orbs, you see these orbs in terms of UFOlogy kind of zap in and out. We also sometimes see them vibrate as well. And it seems like we saw that, and over 80, 100 years, we've slowly gotten to the point where we could create our own version of it. And it does make me wonder how much of what we see out there is ours or other nations as well. Because keep in mind, these videos are from 2014. So that's plenty of time for other nations to have figured this out. looked at the videos. They figured out that they were real. Their intelligence figured out they were real. They reverse engineered the same concepts that we've been able to reverse engineer. Because if we can do it, again, with just a Twitter account and no PhD or anything, then foreign countries definitely can. I even think back to like the Alaska shootdowns, and I wonder, okay, were those even really non-human intelligence, or were those reverse engineered probes that China has put together? Maybe the reason why they don't want to show us is because it would, reveal that we also have those types of capabilities. Because if China has it, we definitely have it too, right? So with respect to the other cases, I would like if we can authenticate these videos to be able to lend credit to all the other similar cases that have been dismissed for whatever reason that kind of show similar phenomenon. And I've seen like a dozen. People send me stuff all the time that are similar, going back to the Philadelphia experiment, to the Madrid airplane that had orbs around it. Lots of stuff similar to it. And some of those two things could have been tests and what have you as well. So did I miss any of your points? But those are my general kind of points. But
yeah. The other one was Sean Kirkpatrick. Referring to metallic orbs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some of the ones like the Iraq metallic orb, and I think that we're not looking at metallic orbs here. We are looking at an energy field that is, as I think that somebody mentioned earlier, is emulating the quanta. So what we're seeing there is it's able to have full mass reduction to the point where they can ignore gravity. And then, because the way we see these things, they're coming at Mach 3 speeds. They're completely ignoring gravity and all friction as well. So to me, that's what we're seeing. There's an energy field. And I've always felt like we're looking at an energy field there, not a metallic orb. I think it would look quite a bit different if what we were looking at was metal. Although we do see a lot of these metal orbs in the zeitgeist right now, which again is part of the reason why I think that what we're looking at here is reverse engineered that is emulating what we would see, pretty much what David Grush has testified to Congress, right? Testified under oath. With respect to Sean Kirkpatrick, I'll just speak off the cuff. I don't trust AARO. I don't trust NASA either. I mean, these are organizations that have to know the truth. They absolutely must know the truth. Right? And if we're able to see these videos in the public sphere, just imagine what they have in the private, in the classified sphere. NASA would be seeing these things all the time with their satellites. They have to be hiding them. Gary McKinnon was just on the Alien Scientist podcast right before me, just 2 days beforehand. He's the one that hacked in and basically said, yeah, we found all this stuff that basically proves that they've been hiding it. I believe that. Honestly, whatever else you might believe about that man, I believe that because it just logically makes sense to me. I even believe that they're hiding life on Mars, not necessarily little green men, but bacterial life. And that's supported by the fact that there's seasonal methane on Mars. There's not a lot of ways to get seasonal methane on a dead planet. One of the ways is that you've got bacteria that's right underneath the surface, potentially just a foot underneath the surface, maybe even on the surface itself. And that is producing.
They've said there's water on the moon. I mean,
yeah, there's water everywhere.
Sorry.
That's the thing too, right?
Yeah.
I'm only laughing because, seasonal methane can potentially be a problem on Mars under the surface sometimes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. And then so they try to argue that, okay, well, the seasonal methane's from some desalinization or I forget what they say, some kind of geological thing. But the problem with it being a geological process, you use it all up. So over time, over billions of years, it would have been used up. So if you have it repeating over time, then it's got to be from some biological process, farts, so to speak. It's a byproduct.
I kind of hate to feel like I need to pull this rabbit out of my hat, but does anyone remember that old Jerusalem Post article from the end of 2021? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Context here, I think.
Oh, it said something about there's a galactic federation. I know that sounds crazy, but it's what it said on the J Post.
Oh, the Galactic Federation thing?
Yeah, that thing, yeah.
The Galactic Federation thing from, I believe it was the Israel defense guy. That's an interesting
he
thing
wrote
as
a
well.
book.
Like, so if you, if you believe that we've been reverse engineering these things for 100 years, then I think that there's a lot of credit to those kinds of stories. For me, it's like, just my personal opinion. Like, I need a little bit more before I'm ready to believe in non-human intelligence, like beings being here. Because to me, it's more, it's easier to understand and believe in, like, maybe some type of advanced AI that can be here. Like, you send probes, I think they're the von Neuron probes, right? Or I may be saying that incorrectly, but I would
Yeah.
imagine more either I'm more on line of like the ultra terrestrial theory, or that there is some type of AI, mechanical AI that has reached us. But my mind's open, whatever comes.
Yeah.
Those are just my opinions.
It does sound crazy, but only because we've never seen anything like it, I think. I think the more we see of these kinds of things, the more we'll be open-minded to think about them in a positive way. Maybe this is possible,
100%. I'd
Yeah.
like to get some more questions if we have people with their hands up, just so we can, share the wealth a little bit if people have them. Because
Yeah, we have some hands up, compadre. Mars, what's your question?
Well, I first of all, the more you describe the everything just sort of shrinking into one point, that scene in the beginning of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where the beam of the inventor's machine hits the apple and then it explodes and then somehow it's recalibrated and it gets it just right and it shrinks the kids. The purpose of the movie. Um, yeah, it's cool, the possibility that that could be technology we have now. I've watched Star Trek from when I was a kid, and it's just to have transporters and the things that make the food, that's possible with
replicators.
the replicators. Earl Grey hot. That's possible if you can take something that's stored in a tiny, tiny one point and then expand it and reconfigure it. That's all possible, and it's just really cool. And I I wonder if the it's just triggering thoughts about the whole nature of reality and um how shit, sorry, I'm a little bit feverish. So if I'm ranting too much, please stop me.
Oh no, you're fine.
Okay.
Can we, Money Penny? Can you mute your mic? I think we got some background sound here. Or Mellow, can you? I can't.
Yeah, no, I took care of it. It's all
Okay, there we
good.
go.
Yeah, I know it's hard on the
Cool.
computer to see what's
So
going on, but
Mars, I'll
Mars,
address a couple
yeah,
of
go
your
on.
points real quick, and then you can keep going if you have
Oh,
other follow-ups. Because I think the Star
oh
Trek analogy
yeah,
is
yeah.
very interesting, right? Is that I think Star Trek gets some of it right, maybe some of it wrong, based on what we're learning here. So when it comes to teleportation, we're not dematerializing something and rematerializing it. We're just able to move at the speed of light, which is actually similar to warp drive, right? So that's the part where I'd say it's pretty close to. Um, but really, when we're talking about being able to achieve quantum states, I mean, now we're opening the door to straight up magic as we would think of it, right? And that's what I think is really cool about Star Trek. And I've also watched every episode of The Next Generation, probably 15 times each, back when I was younger, because I was very interested in outer space in general. And so I think there too is that, it opens the door to all sorts of neat things. And that's why our whole world will change. And I actually think about Star Trek a lot with the Federation and the way that, there's no like demand, essentially. They sort of achieve a utopia, so to speak. And that would be really the ultimate
Totally.
dream, right? Where we get this technology, we can have green energy, we can change the face of the world. But what do they have as well? They have stuff like the Prime Directive. You have an authority structure that tries to ensure that we don't have complete destruction of our own planet. And I think that's, again, the part where we have to be very careful of, at least in my mind.
Yeah, brilliant.
If you just
Mars, yeah,
sorry, just beam cancer out of people and stuff like that, that would make treatment so much just instant, pretty much. I don't know, it's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the
Yeah,
applications
I'll let
for
other people
medicine
talk.
is like huge as well, right? Being able to fight things like cancer, yeah, absolutely seems like it could be possible now, right? So, yeah, it opens the door to everything. It's to me, that's why these videos are the most important videos in the history of the world, which is the first sentence in my letter to Congress, is that yes, Malaysian Airlines and figuring out the answer is potentially, from a human perspective, the most important part, to vindicate the families of the victims, the pilot who was vilified, the witnesses who were discredited, the leaker who potentially went to prison. But it becomes a lot more than just about that very quickly. It becomes about changing the world to a place where we don't even recognize it in 20 years from now. So good comments, Mars. Who else has some questions?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Mars. Chris, what's your question?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm sorry about background noise. I'm at the grocery store. I've posted some videos about aircraft I've seen flying in the skies above Vandenberg Space Force Base and during Space X launches of the satellites they have. They move very similar to what you're talking about. And nobody can give me an answer on them. Just like, yep, So I would recommend taking a look at them. Moneypenny knows where to find them. I'm sorry, I'm going to get off because it's loud here.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and again,
they are good videos. They're quite interesting.
Yeah, people send me a lot of videos, and what I'll say is I don't have all the answers. There's a lot of people out there that deem themselves soothsayers, right? Where you want to ask them questions, and they feel like they'll give you an answer, to whatever you want. It's not the kind of person I am. I'm up front. I don't have all the answers. I would say that I've become an expert at MH370 in these videos.
I'm trying to just back you up on saying that those planes are real.
Yeah, and I think that could be the case.
It's the same formation as your videos, Ashton. So what we're saying is it looks as though it may be a military exercise type thing using these in the same formation. It looks very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they could be, right? But, I think that linking the videos to any other stuff, even if it's very similar, opens the door to being discredited. Because then they can just discredit those videos, and then they can discredit these. And that's the reason why, from an investigation standpoint, I don't do that at all. No matter how similar they look. Like I've mentioned, I've gotten dozens, or at least a dozen videos that are very similar to what we're seeing. Triangle lighted orbs, circling around planes even. And I never link them to these videos because of that reason. So you have to realize that there is a disinformation campaign that's trying to keep these secret. And if you followed the way they've been trying to discredit me, they're looking for any opening to try to discredit the videos, anything. And from your guys' perspective, it may seem illogical, but from their perspective, it's not. Because generally people are easy to trick, very easy to trick. So if I link anything to anything else that's like that, and they can discredit that, they will use that to discredit the videos, despite the fact that I'm looking at 17 pages of evidence in front of me right now that prove that these videos are real. So absolutely, I think it's interesting. You can share the videos with me 100%. I'll take a look at them. But, don't expect me to go on and say, hey, this is what we're seeing in our videos, because it's just not going to happen.
No, I understand, but from a journalist point of view, you need 3 independent sources from different areas, which is why when there was a UFO sighting in the UK with 450 individuals all reporting independently, that's the one that was investigated.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that the way that I plan to authenticate these videos is I'm going to find the person who leaked them. And that's going to be absolute proof, right? As that person comes out and says, yep, I'm the one who did it. And then we've got it, right? So to me, no matter how many independent corroborations we have and other things that are similar, it's not going to get taken seriously by the mainstream. We have to have something that's straight up undeniable. I mean, look at there. I've already ignored these videos, even despite the huge amount of evidence that we've already presented. More evidence than I would argue in any court case in the history of the world. Definitely more evidence than any mysterious plane or any incident ever. And they don't care. They won't even look at it. They won't even touch it. It's just too much for a lot of people to take, right? And some of them may be controlled by the government. So from that perspective,
it's like JFK and 9/11. They're not going to look at either of those. They've got enough conspiracy theorists to fill books on them.
That's very true. I mean, I would say that's very similar, right? Is that you need to not just have a very strong case, but you can't leave yourself open to any criticism whatsoever. Because what they'll do is they focus on whatever aspect they can to discredit the case. Right now, I've given them none. And that's part of the reason why they have to stay silent. And the longer we apply that pressure, the more awkward it gets, right? The takedowns are all very superficial. They're all, oh, this just looks fake. This is dumb. You're an idiot for doing this. You're a weirdo. You're crazy, whatever, right? But none of those hold any water. So they're looking for something else that they can stick to. And you know, I don't plan to give them that. So that's my game plan. I throw all the cards on the table in terms of what my strategy is, and I let them try to adjust. I think that their game plan is also very transparent as well. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, this is a good moment to potentially, if someone wants to put the petition for the related to the letter to Congress, yeah, it'd be really cool to get people to sort of distribute that. And you know, one thing I put in the hashtags above is you know, activism. So we can also explore that in terms of ways of getting Congress to take this on, or to at the very least to broaden the awareness of this research.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say too is check out the post I made yesterday, Welcome to the Future, because I think that corroborates the science that I've been talking about today. And it was been staring in front of me. There's been several times where I've been staring at the evidence for weeks, and I just didn't click. Like, I've been staring. I actually have my background as the thermal picture where you can see the heat signature by where the exhaust vents are. And I had been staring at it for weeks. I didn't realize I'm staring at proof of the fire. And then, and you can even see the smoke coming out of the back of the plane in almost every single image. And then in this one, I didn't realize that in the frame right before the black hole forms, the shell of the plane gets blurry. And I kept saying, well, it's getting cold, which it is getting colder, but more importantly, the blur. Because we can explain the blur, right? Like if you try to take a picture of something that's moving very fast. But what's important is that this plane's already moving very fast, and the camera has no issue with it until the very last frame. What does that tell us? Is this plane is accelerating. Its speed is increasing to the point where the blur is happening. And we can see that the orbs are getting, potentially gravitational lensing is happening to them. They're flattening. Something's happening to them. Also, perhaps most importantly, is you can tell just visually looking at the side-by-side that the plane's actually smaller, slightly smaller in the second image than the first one, than the frame right beforehand, which seems to indicate there is a mass reduction effect happening here, either just visually or, you know, something in general. I mean, I wish we had like another 10 frames, right? If this was like 4,000 frames per second, because then we could actually see exactly what's going on here. But I think that this proves the idea that maybe these orbs are creating some type of electromagnetic shell that's allowing this mass of this plane to reduce down to the point where its time can speed up, its speed can speed up. And to me, that's the missing link on all of this. That's what's being hidden from us. And you can tell why, right? Warp nukes. That's the simple explanation, is that creates an unstoppable weapon. And that's just one application of it, a very basic application of it. Let's see. I think we do a few more questions. I'm probably going to only go for another 15 minutes or less, just because I'm very tired and I've got to prepare for Salvatore Pais interview tomorrow. So let me throw this out there. So I've never interviewed anybody before, right? And a couple weeks ago or less, someone mentioned, hey, you should message Salvatore Pais. This kind of looks or is similar to his patents that he had put out there. So I find his email address, send him an email, say, hey, is this your technology we're looking at? That's pretty much how what my email was like. And I didn't expect him to respond. I've emailed a lot of people, and basically no one's responded, like all the types of UFO people, etc. Even some scientists I've emailed as well. I won't name them, but I email him. He gets back to me the next morning, says, you know, any weekend you want, any Sunday you want, we'll set up an interview. And that kind of blew me away, right? Because he didn't even look to see if I even have a following or anything like that. So just think about what does that mean, right? I sent him the videos. So he looks at the videos and instantly, okay. And he sends me the papers and says, post these papers on your Twitter. I was thinking he's not going to want me to post the papers. He's going to want to keep them hidden or whatever. No, he's telling me to give them away to as many people as possible, right? So to me, that's pretty indicative that at least he believes in his science. And I already found him to be very credible from when I first heard about him. So tomorrow, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, not necessarily directly about the videos, but I'm definitely going to be asking questions about the science that we've been discussing here now that is explained in the videos. And I think that should be very telling. So that's part of the reason why I'm gonna have to end it a little bit, because I got to wake up early and make sure that I'm fully prepared, make sure that I've watched the entire Theory of Everything podcast, because there's already been several points in that podcast where I've been like, wow, we are talking about exactly what we're seeing in these videos. And another thing that I was interesting from listening to that, which is somewhat related to this, is that academics won't look at his stuff. Only one of his papers, the plasma, I'm going to say it wrong. The plasma paper is the only one that these prestigious journals would even accept to peer review to even look at it. So, what he's seeking is mainstream approval, which I got to give him a warning. It's going to be tough, man. From what I've seen from academics, is they're some of the most closed-minded people on the face of the earth. Is that academics believe whatever they've been taught is what is real, and everything that they haven't been taught is not real. The way that science works, and I'm actually going to say this tomorrow on the interview with him, is that it works in jumps, in leaps. Is that consensus is formed, that's all that you have, and then somebody breaks the mold. They shatter the mold, and they leapfrog everybody else. And then the consensus kind of gravitates towards that. I think if you look at science in history, that's how it always works. The Earth was the center of the universe until Galileo comes and says, no, it's not. And then we realize it's not. Newton discovers how gravity works. And so, all of these people are pioneers, and they push science forward. And that's the type of people that we need in this world, people that are pushing forward.
Yeah, it's been so exciting to get to connect with some experts like this, and to see the response and to see the validation. But it's an uphill battle, but I think it's exciting because the people who are truly the ones creating the next chapter of discovery are going to also be the ones to have the courage to step up at this historic time where we are getting some degree of disclosure, and perhaps we can, and then we'll be hopefully getting the rest as well soon after. But I mean, this topic could not have, more fascinating elements in terms of the hive mind approach you and your team took to figure this out and sort of battle it out on the internet publicly, which is a unique sort of modern way of making discoveries collaboratively and chaotically. Everything else about this obviously is if it all lines up as it appears and all the the jigsaw pieces fall into place as they seem to be doing, every single one of them. There's just so much to learn from this. Mars, what do you think?
I very much appreciate the careful, open-eyed. Okay, that's a loaded term around here, but the careful, clear-eyed kind of moving forward instead of just taking a stick and whacking at the bushes and closing your eyes and seeing what you poke. That makes it feel a lot more comprehensible, a lot more I don't know, real. Something like that.
No, I think what people say a lot is people do talk about the approach that I've taken, which I like to think that I'm following the scientific method, which is form a hypothesis, test the hypothesis. If it works out, you move forward. If not, go back to the drawing board, right? And if you follow the case from the beginning, I haven't deleted any posts except for just one that was related to military personnel. And I won't go into too much depth on that. You can actually follow how the investigations progressed and how my thought processes progressed and my opinions. But underlying evidence is essentially stayed nearly unchanged, right? And as we found more evidence and developed those hypotheses, that's where we've had these eureka breakthroughs, like with the fire scenario, with the Nicobar Islands location. And to me, that's the fun stuff because it shows that it's real, right? We would not be able to come up with all of this if this stuff was fake, right?
That's another key thing. Sorry, is you said basically unchanged, but not completely unchanged. Like as you get new evidence, you do revise. So that's important too.
Yep. And I mean, even I've been going through the all evidence list. No, you're fine. I've been going through the all evidence list and we've deleted a few things that are no longer really in play anymore. One thing that we keep going back and forth on is the Iranian passengers, who are these refugees that were factually using stolen passports They were traveling together. They changed their appearance to look like the past stolen passports. In a hijacking scenario, these are your prime suspects. They were traveling to Beijing, but the idea is they were trying to get to Amsterdam. Well, there's direct flights from Kuala Lumpur to Amsterdam. The idea that these people were just like ruled out within like 3 days while we were going through this South Indian Ocean narrative that has no evidence for it is pretty mind-blowing to me. So those people potentially come back in or out depending on which narratives you believe, right? And that's what I like about this case the most, is there's still so much mystery, despite the fact that we have this huge 17-page document of evidence. So we still don't know everything. We've got a pretty clear picture now, but there's still a lot of room for ambiguity. And I think that ultimately that we're not going to know the full truth until the government comes out and says something. What I'll say is I'm not letting anyone set any narratives. I won't name any people, but like there was people today that were claiming that, oh, well, this is the classic CIA playbook or something like that, right? And they were trying to post some evidence, but the evidence was false that they were posting. And their conclusions they were making is based on false evidence. And I'm not going to let people like that set the narrative. And if the government tries to do that, that's the reason why we stack the evidence so high. It gives them no wiggle room at all. They basically have to come out and say, this is non-human intelligence, or yes, these are our orbs. Like nothing else makes sense from a story perspective. And that's what I'm doing here, is that when they do come out and they try to claim whatever, I'm going to be the first person to check and see, does their story line up with the evidence? Because if it doesn't, then we can rule that out. And that's why, we have a bunch of narratives, but none of those narratives are very beneficial to the U.S. government at this point. My personal opinion on their attack strategy is that they're attacking the black hole because they need a way to be able to admit the videos are real without admitting to the technology. That's what they need. So their attack vector is, okay, we'll claim that the orbs and the black hole are fake somehow. We're not going to let them do that either. We've been able to explain the science. We've shown that from a visual effects perspective, there is no discrepancies. We have this huge list of requirements, which essentially rules that out. And if they try to claim that they're the ones who made it because they want to, hoax an alien invasion or whatever, okay, well, nobody's going to believe that, right? At least we might believe that, but the general public's not going to. So really, there's no explanation other than the truth that's going to make sense. And that's, again, the reason why I love these videos. And even early on, I looked at them and went, government's not going to be able to say anything about these. As long as we stack the evidence high enough up, they're just going to be stuck. And that's what's happening right now. That's why the media won't touch it, because anyone who touches this, it just brings more attention to it. That's why people are afraid to say my name, because if they do, it just brings more people to it, more people to the evidence, more people are going to know the truth. And that's why I think that if we do reach some of these huge, huge platforms, then it's just going to be all over for the official narrative. Like even hardened skeptics go, okay, this is a lot of evidence for a conspiracy here. Yeah. Good comments, guys. And also, I just at this point, since we're getting close, I want to thank everybody who's in here right now, listening, of course, and taking the evidence. Like my strategy, again, all cards on the table, is I want everybody to know. I'm not trying to hold back evidence. I'm not trying to keep it from anyone else, because the more people that know, the more protected I am in general too, right? So if I disappear for whatever reason, you guys are going to rise up and take my place. I'm not anybody special. I'm not doing anything special. The evidence is going to be out there. You can take the same evidence and you can tell the world about it, right? And that's what I care about, is the truth. So, that's what I've been doing here, is pushing the evidence out there. And what I like to say too is I want to thank the communities, not just the Twitter communities, even the other social media communities that we've discussed today. A lot of them have contributed from the early days, and I think I've sourced all of them along the way. I've not stolen anyone's information. When you post information on social media, that's public information. I'm not stealing anybody's story. I've developed my own story for what I think has happened. And that's my story, but I open anyone else up to create their own stories based on the same evidence. So, even though we've had falling outs with people, I've had a lot of people, and it's stopped recently, but early on, especially, I had a lot of people trying to tell me what I should believe, what I should follow. And, that's why we had to set rules around that. So if we've had falling outs with people, I want to go ahead and say there's nothing personal related to that. I just have to protect myself and protect the fidelity of the investigation. And that's what I had to do from the beginning. So if people feel like they were blocked, banned, whatever, and they feel like it was not justified, they are free to reach out to me either through a proxy or whatever else. I will take a look at the situation and determine whether or not I did so unjustifiably and potentially unblock them. So far, that's only happened like one time, and I went ahead and did unblock those people. Actually, it's happened a couple times, and I've unblocked them. And if I did so in false case, I apologize for that. But I will look into it and see whether or not it really was a false case. So, don't just come to me and ask and then have me go find out that you're sitting there talking crap about me, because if that's the case, then, it's not going to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. And again, thank you guys. So any other last questions we have? May I do
yeah, we got a couple hands up, so we'll milk you for all of your knowledge. So Imas, am I saying your name right? I know there's lots of little dots and things over the letters.
Yeah, sorry if that's confusing for you, Mello. You have it right, though. I was just curious because I know I've seen Pais's interview on, I think he did one with Project Unity. I'm not sure, Ashton, if that's the one that you had referenced, but I was trying to remind myself and refresh myself on the deal with Pais. And I know that in Ross Coldhart's book, he actually dedicated an entire chapter to the puzzling patents of Dr. Salvatore Pais.
That's bizarre. I was just going to read it in Ross Coldhart's book. I've got it in front of me. I've just taken photographs of the pages.
You know what?
We're on the same thing, yeah.
If you want to read the pertinent, what you deem pertinent, that's probably more appropriate. I just had a couple of things, but yeah, please go ahead.
God, I feel really bad now. Here's me taking photographs of it. The pertinent thing is obviously the patent bit, which is summarized in a really good bit here. Dr. Pais' incredible patent begs a more intriguing question. If the US Navy has cracked this technology, then where could he plausibly have got his ideas from? If what Nat Kobitz told me is correct, that a UAP reverse engineering program was already underway, is it totally outside the realm of probability that the US has been replicating an alien craft and is now about to make a light speed leap in technological breakthroughs? Pate's application for a spacecraft patent included a reference to a scientific paper written in 2015, which suggested there was a theoretical possibility for superluminal craft propulsion in a special relativity framework. And finally, a reference to Star Trek. Superluminal is a cool word for faster than light. Star Trek, warp speed stuff.
That's a pretty cool piece. Yeah, I 100% agree with the conclusions made. I mean, I'm not sure how direct I'm going to be with Salvatore Pais on that, but my personal opinion is that he must have been looking at some craft and was able to reverse engineer the science around it, right? When you look at those patents, they're very, very specific in terms of what they're doing. And when I remember first seeing them, I think in 2018 or whenever they appeared, I just went, you just combine these three patents and you got a UFO. Bam, there it is, right?
Yeah, because there's a couple of them. Just so anybody that doesn't know, the first patent is quoted room temperature superconductor. The second patent is electromagnetic force field generator. The third, high frequency gravitational wave generator. And then the fourth patent, which is, Coldhart categorizes it as the zaniest, the craft using an inertial mass reduction device.
And then, about here, guys, we've been talking about
exactly
all those things, right? So that's why when people said, "Hey, you should reach out to Salvatore Pais," I went, "Holy shit, are we looking at his stuff right here, right?" And that's another reason why I think it's our tech. I mean, this guy patented it, so you look
and the patent, that backstory is really well summarized in this chapter of this book. It kind of talks about how we don't know anything about the breakthrough or the the research and stuff that went on, and that they were approved. It says here, as far as we know, nothing that Dr. Pais said in his patent application had any basis in known and proven scientific, technical, or technological breakthroughs, and neither had it been subject to independent peer review or scrutiny. Oddly, he still got his patent, largely because the Navy vouched for his discovery. And then it just goes on from there. I just thought that was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, if you listen to the Theory of Everything podcast, he actually talks about that. So in mine, just from time purposes, I'm probably only going to talk with him about okay, I don't want to dig too much into the, how it got approved. Like the disinformation out there, which is just patently false, and no pun intended, is that, you can patent anything. That's not true at all. The reason why they push back so hard is that the people who are the investigators or whatever, or the patent office like didn't think it could be real. And so that's why the Navy had to come and step in and say, oh yeah, no, it is. You got to approve this, right? And so that alone disproves this idea where you can just patent anything. And that to me is what lends a lot of credit to his story about it. But in addition to that, I mean, the technology that we're talking about there is exactly what we're seeing here. And so what he was actually asked in that podcast too, what did they ask him? They asked him a couple coy questions. You guys should check it out yourself for sure. But he actually had to dance around a couple of the questions. I think one of them was around inertial mass reduction. Oh no, one of them was the solid state Bose-Einstein. He actually got asked about that, and he said that I'm a patriot, and so I have to be careful what I say is pretty much on that, which really led me to believe that that's what's being hidden, right? Is the inertial mass reduction for a solid object. Not just for a plasma, but for a solid object. That you can create a solid object and get the state of quanta. And that's where the inertial mass reduction theoretically comes into play. But again, for a lot of this stuff, I can't imagine that we just came about this naturally. The way it's presented just seems like, okay, this is the same concept that I give of the caveman and giving them the iPhone. It's like, okay, they didn't figure out how to make an iPhone by themselves as a caveman. They looked at it. It took them hundreds of years, and then the material science caught up to the point where they were able to reverse engineer it. And then the caveman goes and patents the iPhone, and all the other cavemen go, no, that's impossible. That's stupid, right? And blah, blah, blah. It can't be real. And then you find out, oh, no, really, iPhone is real. And they did actually, but they didn't figure it out on their own. They were looking at it, and that's how they were able to determine that. So yeah, I find his stuff to be very credible. I think that we are staring at it in these videos. And that's another reason why I am so convinced that these videos are really authentic, fully authentic.
You say you know the name of the person that leaked it. Why have you not spoken with them?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if you look at the evidence around it, he took a plea deal and he went to prison for 7 to 9 years. And we ignored these videos while he was in prison the entire time. So can you imagine the psychological state of this guy? First of all, he was convinced and told.
Yeah, but you said that's the one thing you want.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the answer there is that you have to be very careful, right? You could put this guy in danger is one thing. And what I'll say is I'm keeping a lot of this close to the vest.
I'd say prison was the safest place, personally.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? But the reality, too, is if he took a plea deal, then they most likely want to keep this guy quiet. So they want to keep him happy as well. So what I would imagine is that they would give him a job potentially related to like a contractor or something like that in the military, to a degree where like he actually admitted they basically convinced him that what he did was wrong. So I'd imagine his psychological state is a state where he's not going to want to talk. He's going to run if we try to talk to him. Now, what I would say is that if this comes out, he can't hide, right? The media eventually would come for him and find out where he's at, get him to talk. The fact that I've been saying his name so much and he hasn't come out and said, hey, man, stop talking about me, I'm not the guy, is a little bit telling to me, right? If he wasn't the guy, I feel like he would have let me know early on. But I'm convinced. I mean, I've looked at the stuff. We're not going to find somebody else who fits the bill better than this guy. And you can take a look at my piece on it. The evidence of why Agent 370's Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. I like to use his military rank because I believe that the government did a disservice to him by making him take that plea deal. And I believe he was abused as well and pretty much psychologically tortured to the point where he took the plea deal. But the reality is, like, if we can get the protections for him, then absolutely, right? But I don't want people harassing him as well because, again, think about what this guy went through. We ignored these videos for 7 to 9 years. Who knows if he's even on the side of disclosure at this point? He's done.
He needs his work vindicated then, so he needs you just as much as you need him.
Yeah, and I plan to vindicate him regardless, one way or the other. If it's the last thing I do, I plan to vindicate that man. Because to me, this technology has the capability of changing the circumstances of millions, if not billions, of people on this planet. Every day I go by 10 homeless people when I go outside and come back. People that have nothing on this earth. And it's just a crime to me that people are sitting out there, rich elite people, determining what the time frame is going to be for disclosing this, who's going to own this super advanced technology, who's going to get even richer off of it, while people out there have nothing at all, while their mental states are deteriorating because they're living out with in the inclement weather, right, with no shelter even. I just can't live with it is the reality of it. I couldn't live with keeping this secret. And that's part of the reason why I'm so driven. And what keeps me going is all you guys and all my supporters as well that believe the same thing. And that's what kind of gives me the drive and the passion to keep going with it. So what I would say, though, is if you're like a reporter, and you find that information compelling, then, we should push forward in all avenues where we can theoretically prove these videos to be real. But keep in mind, again, the mental state of someone who's like that with the leaker, right? And maybe there's other avenues, like we could try to find Regicide-Anon. The problem with that is that Regicide-Anon, in my opinion, is probably from South America, just based on the fact that a lot of the people that uploaded the videos were in Spanish. And if that's the case, they don't have the same protections as an American has. And I do worry about their potential situation.
They're less tracked. I tell you, it's benefited me not being American on a lot of the COVID stuff I was investigating.
Yeah. In some cases, sure. In the case of like advanced military equipment that are, information that they're trying to keep quiet, I think you want to have those American protections and not necessarily South American. But the other thing too is that I feel like that person would have come out, right? If they were somewhere in a situation where they could speak, they would have reached out to me, or they would have reached out to somebody, recently. So I definitely worry about that account because I think they did have direct contact with the leaker based on the fact that in the description it says protected, and based on the fact that it took several weeks for them to post it, tells me they probably had to be convinced themselves. And then they argued with other people that the videos were authentic based on the description of people who uploaded them later on. So yeah, there's a lot of evidence there. I think what we need that bill that's going through Congress right now that will allow for more advanced whistleblower protections. Because if we can get that, then perhaps that's enough incentive for people like Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn to come out and risk his plea deal. Because if he does come out and speak, he's probably going back to prison. But if he comes out as a whistleblower, maybe it's enough. I don't know.
Hey, Ashton, I was trying to find it, the link to your petition for Congress, because it'd be great to put that up in the nest so folks can help sign and distribute it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it myself. I see it normally when I just, like every day I kind of do a search on MH370 and see what people are saying out there. And a lot of times I'll see the petition put out there, which is pretty awesome, where people are reposting it. I'm trying to find a link to it. While that's going on, if anyone has any last questions, go ahead. There it is.
If anyone has a question, they can go before me, but I was going to say something too.
Yeah, please, man. It's definitely your turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I sent to Ashton and Roy, I sent them both a link to a UFO patent of the triangular craft. That's ours, I believe. And I also sent you a comment on Reddit that I made that he told me about some stuff, and I made a comment out of it, and I sent that to you too.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I just went ahead and shared. I think I shared the let's see, is it up there? Yeah, there it is. So just now, I just put the change.org thing in there, which basically is just a list, a link. Actually, somebody else made this on my behalf to the letter to Congress. So if you want to sign that, I think you might have to be American. I don't know, but if you're willing to sign it. Because I'm not kidding about going to Congress.
I'll fake it. I can fake being American.
Yeah, go for
Trump
it.
can do it. I can do it. It's not a problem.
It's just a petition, so anyone can do it.
I mean, they're going to probably ignore it anyway, but we're just trying to, what we're doing right now, just full cards on the table, is we're trying to increase the pressure, right? We've got the evidence lined up. We're trying to draw attention to it. We're trying to also make it so that nobody can deny that they didn't see it. Like these news organizations, like anyone who reaches out to me at this point, even these UFO disclosure people who've been quiet, the moment they start reaching out to me, first question I'm going to ask is why you've been quiet for so long, right? That's the very first question I'm asking anybody.
I wouldn't do that. You're pretty much piss them off, because I can tell you, working for the BBC, if I got that attitude, I'd probably put the phone down on you.
That's
just
totally
saying.
Fine. That's fine by me.
Just quickly, can I just ask, why is it contractors that are always on the UFOs or that side of it? I heard, that's what they do, the military. They would always use contractors as such. In fact, my father was a contractor when he left the RAF at GCHQ, but he certainly wasn't in a NASA UAP thing. Why do you think that is? Why do they not do it with in-house employees?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the answer there is because you can protect it from Freedom of Information Act requests, right? Private companies, they can shield that information. Part of the other argument that I've heard is that it's easier to reverse engineer in the private sector, whereas in the government sector, it's too easy for it to leak out. And when you compartmentalize the knowledge, like if you think of Bob Lazar, he only had access to one part of the UAP, right? And you have to keep it very compartmentalized, because otherwise, if someone sees the whole picture, now it's harder to keep them quiet, right? So from the private sector perspective, it's a lot easier. Is that those people stay there, you can see all the information, you can keep them all quiet and happy, and it's all shielded from Freedom of Information Act requests. I personally believe that if there are UAPs out there, that they've given them to Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all these huge multi-billion-dollar companies that they don't have any like commercial products, right, that they sell out there. They have some, but really they're just intimate with the government. Almost huge percentages of their fundings come from the government. So that's my opinion.
And the GRU in Russia, the GRU being the equivalent of the SAS in the UK, and no doubt a load of independent intelligence services in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's my
Isn't
opinion.
it interesting though that for Pais's patents, anyways, that it was the naval intelligence, like missile people, that nudged along the patent process and got it approved, and that's where Pais works.
Yep.
So I don't know.
I
just think the Navy
now,
has
but yeah, I think
heavy involvement.
Yeah, no, the Navy is the ones who are 100% involved in the UAP program, right?
Oh yeah, baby.
Everything links back to the Navy on this stuff.
They own Area 51.
Yeah, and so exactly, everything's linked to the Navy. I mean, they're the ones, if anything. I mean, maybe the Air Force as well. I've heard, because they have Space Force, right? But the Navy is the one who I've heard back from, that all these sightings and stuff, and because they're either over water or not really sure exactly what the connection is.
It's the genesis of the UAP phenomenon in my book. That's just my speculation. I think that when shit first happened, in the 40s, before or right around 47, like you said, they're on a lot of these things crashed into the ocean or whatever. I think it was those are the OG people who handed down, passed the torch on to other people, but that's just speculative. But it's, just reading that, about the Pais patent, I hadn't even noticed that until 10 minutes ago. I'm like, oh yeah, more Navy people. But definitely the Air Force. And didn't the Air Force wasn't the Air Force born of the Navy? Maybe I'm incorrect. Anyway.
I'm not sure, but totally agree with you on the Navy side. And I recognized that about those patents right away. And I was like, that's pretty weird. Especially because they want to patent it so that other people can't patent it. Especially if you imagine this information is out there and starting to leak out there, and other people are going to start reverse engineering it. They want to be the ones to patent it before somebody else does. Before somebody else does exactly what Salvatore Pais does, right? Because otherwise it gets really awkward. Because now it's oh, you have these things, but a private person patented them in their name, and it's not related to the government. How do you fight that now? Now, the only way to fight that is you have to expose that you have the technology. So it's definitely an awkward situation from the legal perspective. And I think that's how you get the government. That's how you catch them. And that's why, too, with my Freedom of Information Act requests, I don't really have a lot of faith in Freedom of Information Act requests, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to try. Because no matter how they respond, it's going to give us information. They've rejected basically every Freedom of Information Act request that I've put in. Except for the one about the general and their emails, who they claim that they didn't have any emails. So that also tells me information too. It tells me they're not communicating their military movements and their operations by email. So you can still glean some information from that.
Was this specific? Did you say the general? Which one?
So that was the general that I had heard from my sources, that their nephew had shown them the videos. Retired General Joseph F. Dunford. Supposedly he has a nephew.
Oh, yeah.
I actually didn't even verify he has a nephew, but if we verify that he does, then it'll add even more credibility. I already believe that he does have a nephew, and that he didn't laugh at the videos at all. Turns out he was in charge of the International Security Forces in 2014, and despite the fact that the search was a complete failure and nobody found any parts of the plane, he got a promotion to the highest ranked military officer in the United States government, advisor to the president, to the Joint
Hell
Chiefs
yeah.
of Staff, Department of or Secretary of Defense. And so he was the highest ranked military officer to 2019, despite the fact that they didn't find anything from part of this plane during his tenure. And then what did he do after he retired in 2019? Became board of directors at Lockheed Martin. That's quite the career, if you ask me.
Yeah. Hey, Logan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, man, I was gonna say it just seems so typical, doesn't it? It always seems to be like where they tend to ride off into the sunset is that those handful of companies, right? It doesn't seem to be
Yeah,
a
and like we
coincidence.
were just talking about, right? That's in my mind where you go to hide the information. If what we're looking at is their technology, then wouldn't surprise me if Lockheed Martin's the one building the orbs either, honestly, or whatever we're seeing that's being able to create that orb effect. Yeah.
Yeah, don't they own like all the land around like what is it? I think it's White Sands Missile Base. I think Lockheed bought up. Kind of weird, but anyway, oh, I totally forgot I was gonna ask. Oh well, how you doing?
You're doing good. How are you doing? That was Logan, right? Sorry, it's hard for me to tell.
Yeah, man.
Hey,
Yeah.
how's it going, man? Nice to hear from
Oh,
you.
damn.
Yeah,
You
we're
too,
getting
man.
ready
You
to
know
close
what?
down here, but yeah, go ahead, keep going.
You were like I think it was a space that Mello and I was doing that I think your first couple of spaces on this account, right? But I think you used to come to spaces before like on a different account, right? I mean, when did you start like doing this whole activist thing for this whole thing?
Yeah, this is the only account I've had. I did end up changing my account name just because I had this account from like way back in 2014 when I was a lot younger and played more video games and was going to use this account to try to promote that, but I never really did or anything like that. I was never into Twitter
Call of
back
Duty?
then. No, for me it was League of Legends was the game that I was big into at the time. I liked strategy stuff in general. But yeah, and then when this started to come about, I tried to pick which social media platform. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of Reddit in general. And so I figured the Twitter, just given the fact that what I read about the Twitter files and Elon Musk taking over, that would be the least likely for me to be censored. And so I basically repurposed my existing account to, do this. And that's why, you'll see pretty much just this on my account going back. And yeah, I haven't deleted anything. Even I didn't even delete old tweets or anything like that either. I left everything up because reality is I want people to see that I'm a normal person who has my own political opinions in general. Although I would say that I'm very apolitical, especially after seeing these videos. The reality is that both sides of the political spectrum are hiding this. It's not limited to one or the other. And yeah.
Yeah,
I love
definitely
it. Thank
vibe.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. Yeah, and I definitely vibe with that whole aspect of this area of research is that it does unite everyone, and it helps us get past our petty terrestrial differences with politics and things like that, because that just distracts us from finding the truth, and the truth is much bigger than just anything. Just in terms of our human present tense, it's about learning about much more than that. The things that could potentially, like I think Ash and others were discussing earlier, could potentially help us get through these horrific circumstances we're in right now.
Think we'll ever learn the truth, the real truth?
I think we
Well,
will. It's just a matter of time, right? Like, eventually they'll be able to admit it. The question is, hopefully it's not 50 years from now, right? The time that they'll be able to admit this is when they tell the truth of the technology. That's probably the time frame we're dealing with here. I don't think they're afraid of telling the truth that they were looking at MH370. I think they're afraid of the technology. And the corroboration there is that what really happened here is a lithium-ion battery fire. And that's a very mundane event relative to hyper-advanced technology. So it explains, like, why would you have to cover that up? Why build this whole fake narrative of South Indian Ocean? Well, the answer is pretty apparent, is that this technology can't be revealed. And part of the reason is probably they didn't want to reveal to China and Russia. But the reality of, because the video's leaked, it kind of obsoletes that excuse, right? And now it's more of an issue of, you have to admit to the world that you have this super advanced technology that could change the world and you've been hiding it. Can you imagine the consequences? People will lose their minds. I mean, look at how angry or whatever we are about them lying about it. If they tell this to the whole world, it's going to break people's minds. And I'm not even joking about that. A lot of people that think that whatever they hear on the TV is true, if you were to tell them this and this level of conspiracy is real, it will shatter all trust forever. And not just the US government, but probably almost all governments, because it's not just them lying about this.
You say that, but the Mexican government had 2 small aliens in a glass case that they presented at a big news conference, and nobody batted an eyelid. And I don't think anybody's even spoken about it since.
There were 3 of them actually, and they had names. I forgot them though.
Yeah, the Nazca mummies. And interestingly
Yeah.
enough, Jamie Mauson, who was actually did a piece about us, and I spoke to him personally and looked at this case. And I don't think that's over yet either. But if you look at it, they'd use the same disinformation tactics, right? Is attack the source.
Oh, nobody spoke about it, and it wasn't covered in any papers in the UK. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think that's
well,
telling
we were
too,
talking
right?
about it here. We're still researching it actively, just so you know. And I could not agree with you more that what you're saying in terms of this. I think, Ashton, you're always honest and everything, and you're telling your truth. But I think the world is ready for this. And I think, if anything, we'll have to just try to get the world's attention so they don't just forget about it after a couple of news cycles.
Don't forget about me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's, again, it's that, if they were to reveal that too, it's paradigm shifting. A lot like the technology here is paradigm shifting. So my mind's not necessarily made up on that, though I am leaning towards them being authentic. But, it's hard to say. I just haven't even had time to dig into it, honestly. But I would say that if you care about that type of thing, then, become an activist for it. Dig into the evidence, share the evidence, the same way that I'm sharing the evidence right now, right? If you're watching my stream right now, you're watching 17 pages of evidence that I've been kind of formatting here, trying to make it a lot cleaner. I think you can do the same thing with the Nazca mummy evidence.
I am doing that, by the way.
Oh,
Sorry, no, you're the star
You're
of the
the
space, but Moneypenny, which is a lovely name, I invite you to join and collaborate on this because it's something I'm actively working on.
Well, I'd love to. If you send me a DM with the details, that'd be great.
Okay,
you guys are streaming right now on YouTube.
Yeah, I was watching Ashton on YouTube earlier. I've only got 2 devices, and one of them needs charging, so I was a bit stretched.
Yeah, I'm going to close on the stream here in a minute too, but I will be streaming tomorrow before the Pais interview, working on the Pais interview, working on the evidence list, and getting prepared for some podcasts that I have coming up as well, because not only do I want the evidence list ready, but I want the talking points, because not only is this about having the evidence lined up, you have to present it in a very specific way too. And so for me, the way I like to start is breaking down the official narrative, because that's the part where people have ingrained into their mind, right? Then you start to get into, okay, guys, let's start dealing with the hyper advanced technology that's being kept hidden, right? And so I think how you present it is just as important as the weight of the evidence itself.
I will just say, when you say how do you present it, I am not, an expert in this. I did find some of your longer, very technical videos really hard work. So maybe I would say present it by doing an abstract and a summary at the beginning for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then say to people, right, if you want to go into the depths, now I'm going into it. Because I think for anyone who you're trying to sell the story to or grab them before you go into the detail, I did find it heavy going. That's just feedback, which I hope will be useful.
Oh, no, it is. Actually, I think my own mother told me that early on, is that you have to digest it and break it down. I mean, the reality is it's so much, and this is so involved in terms of evidence perspective that it's really hard to boil down. And that's kind of what I think, that looking at the congressional letter is kind of my best approach to it, where,
Gosh, that was a long letter. I couldn't believe that, Ashton. It was brilliant, but it was incredibly long.
Yeah, I mean, I tried my best to distill it down. So what's coming up as well is going to be Veritas, which is truth. And that's, my truth of what I think happened. And I'm hoping to be able to distill that down into 2 pages. I think the congressional letter is like 5 or 6, or maybe even close to 8.
Be careful they don't get confused on that with Project Veritas, because journalists will react very differently if they think it's a Project Veritas
they
thing.
anymore, right? I think Project Veritas is gone now. I think
the big guy left, but I think they're still, doing
Good
some
call,
stuff.
Though. Good call. I do need to be careful about that. So thank you guys all for the info or the questions. Is there any more that we need to get before we close out? Because otherwise I'm going to have to go to sleep here pretty soon. I am tired. Yeah,
we got to let you prepare, and not that, you'll be great, but just get your beauty sleep. Not that you need that either, but, okay, we're going to let you go. But any last questions before that?
You're a machine, man. You're a machine.
Just a big thank you.
Yeah, and thank you guys back. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for getting the word out. I've seen people out there spreading the evidence, which is honestly brings joy to my heart because, again, I want to empower everybody with the evidence, help make sure they get it out there. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about it. I'm an open book. I answer pretty much all my DMs as well, although it does get harder and harder now that we've grown to such a significant size. So, again, thank you all very much for being here
Can
on
I
the
say
space.
one thing one more time? Or one little minute message? Good night, darling. It was lovely listening to all you. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, cool.
No.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to our
Yeah, it
special
was
guest,
lovely.
Ashton. Yes, please continue.
Good night.
Oh, good night to you as well. Good night to everyone. Okay, this is the sad part
Thank
where I have to
you. Good night. It was very interesting.
Okay, anyone else want to say good night as well?
God love Ashton. God love that man, and everyone else too.
Yeah, so this is when I get mushy too. I do love you people. This is a wonderful community. I'm grateful to be here doing the UFO Twitter Week with you guys, and it's I think part of the essence of it, in terms of when Astral kind of initiated this wonderful collaborative community thing, is that bring in people who are experts and or at the forefront of this topic, this world, this field of inquiry into the nature of reality. And Ashton definitely is like a fantastic example of that, and the idea is to
Okay, guys,
open it
so
up to
we're
the
gonna
community
close
as much
down
as possible so that we
stream
can all kind of
here.
access this wisdom
Tomorrow we're
and
gonna go
vibe together.
through
So I'm just really
the
grateful
Pais
for
interview
everyone here,
questions.
and
We're gonna get those
let's
ready to
continue
go,
this collaborative approach to
and we're gonna probably
finding the
finish this
truth.
up as well.
And
We're
now
getting
I'm
pretty
gonna
close to finishing this
have
up.
to hit the kill switch, but it's not because I'd keep this going, but we got to let Ashton go. So I love you all. Good night.
Okay, we'll close down that. So yeah, we're gonna finish this up tomorrow. Probably get this kind of at least in a rough draft format. We've got most of the bullet points set up here. Probably gonna remove some of the narrative stuff. Probably won't keep a lot of that. We'll see. We got a little bit of extra stuff down here as well we're gonna go through, but I think a lot of this has already been addressed up above. But yeah, so come check it out tomorrow, guys. Tomorrow, interview with Salvatore Pais will be at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'll make a post about it tomorrow morning, probably, just as a reminder for people. And then I'll jump in and start streaming and get the questions ready. I actually have already been working on them. They're not super detailed right now. This is really all I have at the moment. And I may revise some of these as well. And then I have actually a list of notes with new stuff I'm going to add. I also need to finish getting through the Theory of Everything podcast. So I'm going to try to speed through some of that, maybe even tonight. Thank you guys for all being here. If you missed it, you can check out the replay. The moment I close it down, you should be able to watch the replay. It'll be out there. I probably won't upload it. You can just check my live tab, and you can check out everything. So have a good night, everybody, or morning for Jim and the other people in there. Yeah, 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow is going to be the Salvatore Pais. So thank you guys for being here tonight, and we'll be in touch tomorrow. Take it easy, guys.